Hello there. Hi, Callie. It is currently 10 a.m. I thought, what a better way to spend this lovely, beautiful, sunny day than to sit outside, smell the roses, and to talk about fairy porn. That's right. It's a court of thorns and roses, baby. Now, I recently stumbled upon one of those little libraries that are just filled with books that nobody wants to read, but nobody wants to throw away. And what did I see shining in there, lonely and waiting for someone to come grab it? But this bad boy. So, obviously, picked it up because I knew I had to read it. Now, I did not know anything about this book going into it. I knew it had fairies in it, and I knew a old bit of smut in there. You know, the age-old question.
What if fairies clapped cheeks?
Nonetheless, picked it up, got to reading, and let me tell you, I loved this book. This book is so ridiculous. I didn't know what to expect going in, but it is absolutely wild. Truly, this book goes in like 30 different directions all at the same time. Are any of them good? I don't know, but I like them nonetheless. I finished this book after like less than a week of reading, and let me tell you, I am bad at reading. In the 3 days since then, this book and its stupid plot have taken up every single fucking spare crevice of my smooth brain. Truly, the only conversation that I would be able to hold at this point is about this dumbass book and its plot. If you have not had the utmost pleasure of reading this book, first of all, I would read it. Again, it's great. It's a good time. Most of it's a good time. If you don't want to read this book, you can listen to my hot takes from reading it exactly one time and not knowing what's going on. So, let's get into it. I just wanted to pop in here real quick. This book deals with a lot of sensitive subjects that might not be for everyone. So if any of these look like something that you can't handle hearing about or you would just rather not spend your time listening to, then I would not recommend you watch this video. And I would also not recommend that you read this book because they're really prevalent throughout the whole thing. But if this is something that works for you, then keep on watching. Okay, thanks. Bye! Alright, picture it if you can. A scene opens up with a teenaged white girl in the woods hunting with a bow and arrow. Already, I am absolutely sold on this book. Now, our main girlie of the day, her name is Feyre, spelled Feyre. First of all, why? Why would you name someone that? That's not a name. They even had to have like the little fucking parentheses to show you how to pronounce it because the name is so stupid. And like her name, Feyre herself is so stupid, but we'll get into that later. Scene opens. Feyre is in the woods hunting for a deer. Her family is quite poor. They used to be rich. Now, after a series of unfortunate events, her family is now poor and they are essentially just like starving. Feyre is the only one in her family who's trying to do anything to keep everything going. Like the girl boss she is out in the woods hunting for her dinner and she sees a deer in the distance and she's gonna go shoot it with her bow and arrow, but then out of the corner of her eye she sees a wolf stalking in. Now, this isn't just any regular old wolf. This is a giant, like, dire wolf looking motherfucker. And Feyre realizes this is probably a fairy. Within this world, there are fairies and there are humans. Essentially, in ye olden times, the humans used to be enslaved by the fairies, and then there was a war, the humans fought back, and they were able to gain some independence. So the place that they live, it's like 90% fairy realm, and then this little sliver of land at the bottom is designated for the humans. That's where they're supposed to live. So Feyre lives in the mortal side of the world, and the fairies aren't supposed to cross the border. But nonetheless, here one is. Now, Feyre just fucking hates fairies. She is like, good riddance, let's kill this guy. She's like, if I die going for the wolf, at least I will have killed a fairy. The 4 pillars of her life is gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, and then straight up just bigotry. Anyway, she sees the wolf going for the deer. She takes her trusty arrows and she shoots the wolf. Now, there are a few things to know about the fairies. At this point, Feyre believes that they can only be killed by ash, like the wood ash. So there are no ash trees anywhere, but she has one special arrow that's made of ash. Fairies do not like iron. They can also be killed by iron. And fairies cannot lie. So those are the 3 pillars of faith That's what Feyre knows about the fairies. So anyway, in her quiver, she's got like 2 regular arrows and 1 ash and iron arrow. She takes the special arrow, shoots the wolf. As the wolf is laying there dying, it doesn't try to move at all. It just stares at her blankly, even though it's still alive. And she takes another arrow, a regular one, just like knocks it, shoots it directly into the wolf's eye, killing it. Again, the wolf didn't fight back. I'm sure that won't come up later. So anyway, Girlboss takes the deer that was also killed, skins the wolf, goes back home. At home, we meet her family. She has 2 sisters and a dad. The dad used to be, you know, like the money winner of the family, but after making a few bad investments, the debt collectors came and they took everything they had. They absolutely like fucked up his knee, so now he's disabled and they're all just extremely depressed. Her sisters won't do anything. They basically just like sit around and complain, and Feyre is really the only one keeping it together. We also find out that her mother's dead.
Oh no.
And basically on her mother's deathbed, the mother made Feyre, who's the youngest, promise that she would keep the whole family together. Now, at this point in the book, they have not said that Feyre was a girl. I was getting the plot of this book and the captive prince confused, so I thought Feyre was a boy. I thought this was going to be a gay book, and it wasn't, which is very disappointing, but so is the world. So anyway, Feyre gets back with the deer, and her family is stoked because she has a deer, but also just like complaining and roasting the shit out of her. Her sister is like, "You're fucking stinky, go take a bath." So anyway, she does that before she then cleans and cooks the deer for them. And also she has 2 sisters. One is Elaine, who's quite a bit nicer. And then there's Nesta, who is just so mean. She's the one that's like bullying her and truly is just such a stick in the mud. Anyway, they were able to eat some of the deer. The next day, she was able to take the wolf skin that, you know, she carved off the wolf's body, bring it into town, sell it. So now they have money to, you know, buy clothing and things that they need. Like anytime she gets any sort of money, the sisters are all over her and they want some. So she gives them like a fucking coin to just go, you know, buy whatever dumb shit they want. Hi!
I rang the doorbell.
Oh, sorry. I was sitting out here working.
Oh, no. Nice outside here.
Yeah, it's lovely out here.
It looked like you had a tripod set up.
We're back after a brief home invasion. Anyway, Feyre goes to the market, she sells the pelts, gives her sister some money, and then she goes off to meet up with her lover boy and go have sex at a barn. So anyway, after that, Feyre goes back home, her and her family eat dinner, her sisters, you know, went shopping at the market, whatever. After they finish up their dinner, what do they hear at the door but a little knock, 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 and then fucking crashing through the door comes this giant, like, beast monster. Now, I don't remember if this was described as a sort of, like, wolf creature, but I'm thinking, like, Beauty and the Beast, but more wolf-like. This beast comes barreling in, is fucking pissed. It's like, I know someone here killed a fairy. Who did it? And everyone's like, oh shit, that's not good. And the beast says, you all know the treaty between, you know, the fairy world and the mortal world, saying that, like, they can't kill each other. You all know what the treaty is. I'm here to claim that debt, and whoever killed the fairy, they owe their life to me now. Feyre, girl boss that she is, like, well, I didn't kill a fairy, but supposedly if I did, what would happen? And the monster's like, according to the Treaty of the Lands, the monster says, your 2 options are either 1, I kill you right now, or 2, you come with me to the fairy realms to, you know, live out the rest of your life. She's like, ah, shit. Well, between death and a slight relocation, she decides to go with him. Now, as she's leaving, she tells her sisters, you're going to take the rest of the money that we got from the market. You're going to buy, like, supplies that you need. You're going to, you know, dry out the deer, all of this stuff. Like, this is how you fend for yourself. And she tells them, whatever you do, do not marry, like, the first guy that comes knocking. That's not going to solve all your problems. And Nesta, the mean one, who has a boyfriend, is like, I'm just going to marry him. And Feyre's like, do not marry him for the love of God. Literally, like, choose starving over marrying him. His dad beats his mom and none of the kids do anything about it. Like, do not marry that man. With that, Feyre heads out and she goes with the beast. Now, the absolute girl boss heroine that she is immediately like, how do I find a way out of this? I'm going to outsmart an immortal god, and I'm going to find a way to get out of this debt. Immediately on the ride back to the Faerie Lands with the monster, she's trying to chat him up so much that he knocks her unconscious with magic so that he doesn't have to listen to her, and like 3 days later she wakes up in front of this like fairy mansion. She's like, ah, shit, now I don't know how to get back. So anyway, now she's in the fairy realm, which is also called Prythian. Now she walks into the manor and there's just like a fucking array of food lined out on a table for her. And again, this is the girl that like 2 days ago was starving to death. She sees it all, but it's like, I can't eat it. Like fairy food, like they'll enchant it. Like you eat it, that's how they enslave you. And in front of the table, there are, you know, two people. There's the Beastman who sits down in a chair at the table and fucking like Shazams himself. There's a flash of light and he turns into a beautiful man. As all romance novels do, he is nothing more than a white man with blonde hair. What a dream. Next to him is another fairy who introduces himself as Lucien. And the weird thing about these two is that they're both wearing like these very ornate masquerade masks. She's like, that's weird, but it must be some just like fashion choice for them, whatever. And Lucien, who's the second guy, not the blonde guy, Lucien has red hair. He's different. And he just starts fucking like ripping into her. He is so pissed at Feyre. He's like, this is the fucking human that killed Andres. Andres, we find out, is their friend who was the wolf who she murdered. Like, fuck it. Like, we should just kill her right now. And the blonde boy is like, no, absolutely not. Like, you know, she's in my household under my protection. Like, we're not gonna hurt her. And Lucien's like, no, let's kill her. Let's fuck her up. So they tell Feyre to eat something. She doesn't want to eat anything. And they're like, well, you know, you look like shit, so I'm gonna have Alice, who's like the head of the household here, also wearing a mask. So they're like, we're gonna have Alice, you know, show you to your rooms, whatever, you can get cleaned up, la-di-da. So she goes upstairs and she finds out that she has like this very nice room. It's, you know, a manor house, and she's given the utmost, what are those things called? The utmost accoutrement, whatever you want to call it. She's got like, you know, nice room, nice bed, all this lovely stuff. And Alice puts her in a bath, you know, scrubs her down real good, and then has her get dressed into new clothes. Now, the clothing that she brings her is this like big old pretty dress, and Feyre, just being the absolute piece of work that she is like, I'm not gonna wear a dress. And Alice is like, you're here against your will. This is what we have for you. And she's like, I'm not wearing a dress. And she puts up such a fucking stink about it that Alice finally gives in and is like, all right, whatever, fine, you know, shut up. She gets her like a pair of pants and like a shirt, puts her in those, and then sends her back downstairs to get some dinner. Feyre goes back downstairs to the dining room with Lucien and our mysterious blonde-haired boy, and she's still like standing in the corner not talking to them, and they're like, oh, you know, like, sit down, have some food, you know, eat something. And she's like, I'm not eating food, like that's how you get me. And they're like, we're not poisoning the food, we're not gonna enslave you, like, we're just, you know, doing what the treaty tells us to do. Like, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. Like, you can go somewhere else in the country, you're not being held captive, but, you know, we're not gonna have you starving. And she's like, no, I don't want to eat anything. And so the blonde guy magically restrains her. It's like, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna eat something because I'm not gonna have you dying on my watch. So she finally gives in and she starts eating. And we find out that our blonde boy's name is Tamlin. What in the fucking Colleen Hoover naming convention is going on here? Our two main characters are Feyre and Tamlin. Why? I don't even have time to go over all of that. But anyway, now at this point, Tamlin's trying to be nice to her, Tam, if you will. Lucien still fucking hates her. There's nothing but like spite and vinegar coming out of this man's mouth. Tamlin is like trying to be a courteous host, and he's like, you look a lot better now. Like, you look nice in your new clothing. She's like, is this motherfucker trying to flirt with me? Like, what is going on here? They're trying to make small talk. Things are not going well. Lucien at one point is like, Tamlin here is really rusty with the ladies. And Anyway, they continued their just horribly awkward conversations. She eats as much food as she possibly can, and then Tamlin has to stop her and just be like, don't throw up in my house. While they're at dinner, she is trying to convince them to let her go and is like, my family's gonna starve without me. Tamlin's like, I'm taking care of your family. Don't worry about it. They're gonna be okay. She is not at all convinced. At this point, she's like, well, like, I'm not a slave. Like, what am I supposed to do? Are you going to give me work to do? And they're like, no, you can just do whatever you want to do. She's like, I don't understand. They're like, we're in a magical world. Like, what do you want to do? You want to get a hobby? You can do a hobby. So anyway, she is like, I've had enough of this, goes off to bed. The next day, she goes out and she's like wandering around the gardens. And she sees Tamlin. He's like, hey, trying to escape? And she's like, no, she absolutely is trying to escape. They get to chatting. He wants to chat. She does not want to chat. She's like, why don't you just kill me? And he basically says, like, you're free to go if you want, but, the rest of Prithian is a lot less forgiving than I am. So, like, if you stay here, you'll be safe. But if you want to, wander the countryside, you're free to do so. But you'll probably die. She starts asking about, like, everything that's going on. Tamlin mentions that there's a magical blight that's going on that's sort of, like, weakening the powers of all of the fairies within the realm. But if she stays on, like, his estate, he'll keep her safe. She's like, well, like, what's this sickness? Like, is it gonna cross over to the human world? She's like, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, it's nothing to worry about. It's, like, our problem. It'll solve itself out, but, it could spread over into the mortal realms. She's like, that's not good. Anyway, she is still plotting her escape. She decides that the best course of action would be to convince Lucien, the man who has actively threatened to kill her multiple times at this point, to get him to convince Tamlin, the nice one, that Tamlin should let her go. The logic is flawless. The next day, she's, walking around. Tamlin finds her again. Is like, oh, hey, you want a tour of the place? She's like, no, I want to be alone. He's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just leave you alone then. And he leaves, and she immediately fucking, like, books it to find Lucien. He's at the stables, and he's planning on going out on, a hunt. He's on border patrol today. He's planning on going out and invites her to come along with him, sort of begrudgingly. Literally, like, immediately after leaving the stables, Lucien's like, I don't know what you're playing at here, but I'm not gonna get you out of here. I'm not gonna do shit. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, you came here because you want me to convince Tamlin to let you go. Like, first of all, I do not have that sort of pull with him. Secondly, if I did, I wouldn't get you out of here anyway. She's like, shit, what am I supposed to do now? As Lucien and Feyre are going on their little horseback riding adventure, he starts insulting her, and she's like, what the fuck? I didn't come here to be insulted. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And she's like, oh, well, if fairies can't lie, then he must actually be sincere about the apology. They get to talking. She asks, like, what's up with the masks? And he's like, it's part of the blight. 50 years ago or whatever, we were having a celebration, and some magic occurred, and they all got stuck on our faces. He mentions a mysterious her, and there's like, shit, I can't be talking about this. If word gets back to her, I'm going to be in real big trouble. Feyre's like, I wonder who that is. I'm sure it won't come up again. Now, both Tamlin and Lucien are these high fae. There are basically 3 rankings. So there's like the high fae, who are the nobility. These are like the lords and the ladies, all that sort of shit. Underneath them are like the regular fairies, who are just, like the common people. And then sort of underneath them as like a subcategory of fairy is like the bad fairies. These are like, your monsters, creepy crawlies and your ghouls, if you will. Oh, that's the other thing about Lucien. They've all got these masks on, but Lucien's only got one eye. It's him, his fucking red hair, and he's got like this crazy scar across his face and a fucking metal eye that just like whips around and is like following her over the place. Very hot, Mad Eye Moody. Now, things start to get a little bit quiet. The wind stops blowing, the birds stop chirping, and Lucien is like, you need to like stand still, don't move. She's like, what's going on? This monster comes passing by them, and it starts like whispering to Feyre. She can't see shit. It's like, look at me, 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 look at me. And she does not. She's like staring dead ahead. She's like, I'm going to die. The thing passes, and she asks Lucien what was that, and he's like, oh, that's, a bog. It's one of the monstrous creatures that are getting in. It shouldn't be in this area, but because of the blight, things that are usually not here are getting in, and it's a big problem. So anyway, they go back for dinner. Tamlin's sitting in the dining room, and both of them come strolling in. So, what did you guys get up to today? And Lucien's like, we went on border patrol, and Feyre came with me. And he's like, I thought you wanted to be alone. Just alone from him. Lucien mentions to him, like, saw Bog out on patrol. And Tamlin's like, what? And he immediately just, like, gets up, books it out of there, and, like, storms out of the manor. Now, he is going on, like, the hunt for this thing. He flash changes into a wolf again and, like, gets out of there. Feyre was like, what's that all about? And he's like, he's going out to hunt that thing down. Anyway, she has her dinner, goes off to bed, and when she's in her room, she is, once again, still plotting to escape. She looks out her window, and who does she see? Fucking Metal Gear Solid crawling around in the backyard. But her dad, her disabled father, has followed her all the way there to come rescue her. Feyre does not think anything's weird about this and is like, oh, he loves me, and jumps out the window to, like, go run to him. They start to leave the estate together. As she's about to leave, giant wolf hand grabs her, and it's Tamlin. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, you know, whatever you're following, it's not what you think it is. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they look over at what she thought was her father, and it's, like, shape-shifting into, like, 3 separate things. Tamlin's like, it's not your dad, it's another monster that we have living here, and, like, guides her back into the house. And he's like, everything here is going to trick you. You need to have your wits about you, which little does he know, she has none. But you need to keep your wits about you. You need to, like, not trust everything you see and hear. You need to get it together, or you are gonna die real soon. So she's kind of pissed, so she goes back up to her room and goes to sleep for the evening. Next thing, it's more of the same. She goes out on patrol with Lucien. Tamlin's nowhere to be seen. He's still hunting down that thing. And as night comes around, she has a nightmare, wakes up, and can't go back to sleep. So she starts wandering the halls. As she's wandering the halls, she's like, I need to know my way around this place so that I can escape if need be. She gets, like, a pen and a piece of paper and starts drawing a map. But we find out your girl can't read. She is, like, pretty much completely illiterate. She tries to draw a map of the house, but can't, like, write anything down. So it's just, like, marking things with, like, insane scribbles and symbols while she's lurking around in the middle of the night doing this. Who busts through the front doors but Tamlin in his monster form? He comes in and he, you know, like, flashes back into his boy version, and his arm is, like, pouring out blood. Now, fairies have the ability to heal. They're immortal and they can heal pretty fast, but his arm really is not healing fast at all. So she's like, you're gonna bleed out. Let me take care of you. And brings him on over to the infirmary so she can bandage him up. While they're there, he's like, what are you walking around doing? What are you drawing on this little piece of paper? And she's like, oh, I'm making a map. He looks at the map, and this is some, like, Zodiac killer level nonsensical scribble shit. He's like, what is this? And she says, I don't know how to read. And he's like, you don't know how to read? She does not take that kindly. She is very insecure about it. And she's like, well, the options are learn to read or learn to hunt. Like, I had to learn to hunt so that we didn't starve. And he's like, no, fair enough. That's where she got so good at, like, bandaging up wounds, is because if she got hurt, she needed to be able to fix it. Otherwise, she'd die. They have a nice little touching moment, getting to know each other while patching each other up. He says thank you. She's like, oh, of course. And then they, both go off their separate ways. He killed the Bog, but, got injured in the process. The next day, she wakes up and she goes up to Lucien for their regular patrol, and he's like, nope, I'm not taking ya. I'm busy doing some other shit. And he's like, but since you're free, Tamlin here would love to hang out with you. And Tamlin's like, so Feyre very begrudgingly has to spend the day with Tamlin, but Tamlin, being the polite host that he is like, hey, come here, I'll show you around. I want to show you something. Dude, take a shot every single time this man says, I know a place, and you will be out of your mind wasted by the end of this. He brings her through the house and brings her to giant door, throws open the doors, like, lights it all up with magic, and it's a giant study. It's a library. And she's like, holy shit, like, look at all these books that I can't read. And at this point, she really wants to write her family. She wants to know that they're okay. She wants them to know that she's okay. She goes in there and she's like, oh, I'm gonna learn to read. And Tamlin's like, you want any help? She's like, no, I don't want any help. She, like, clearly wants to be left alone. So he's like, I'll just leave you to it. Have fun. And he leaves. So she walks in and she sees this giant mural in the background, and it's of the continent they're on and like their nearby world. This is where we get a big exposition dump. On the big old island that they're on, like the top 90% of it is Prythian. That's the Faerie Land. And at a little sliver at the bottom is the mortal worlds. Now, within Prythian, there are 7 courts. There's the spring court, the summer court, winter court and autumn court, and then day court, night court, dawn court. And then like in a big line across the middle of that, there's just labeled on this map just something called Under the Mountain. Totally normal. Again, won't come up later. And it's this huge depiction of the war that they had 100 years ago, how before that all of the humans were, you know, enslaved, and after the war the humans kind of like gained their independence, and they set up this whole like wall system and a treaty basically saying that no one's going to kill each other, like the humans stay on your side, the fairies stay on your side, and everyone's going to get along by like not acknowledging each other existing. And basically all of the humans that were enslaved had to be freed. So our girl is sitting there for a while, you know, trying to read. She's writing down words she doesn't know. It's not going well. She gets super frustrated, like crumples up her pieces of paper, throws them away. This shit's taken too long. I need answers now. Now, she had heard stories about, you know, like some of these creatures in the fairy realm, and one of them being a surreal. A surreal, supposedly, if you capture it, it will tell you anything you want to know and truthfully. So she's like, that's my way out of here. There's got to be some loophole to the treaty. And if there's anything that I can do to get out of here, like the surreal knows what it is. So she heads up to her best friend in the world, Lucien. She goes up to him. It's like, hey, if one hypothetically wanted to catch a surreal, how would one do it? And Lucien's response was, well, if someone wanted to do that, that would be an incredibly stupid thing to do. But hypothetically speaking, the things you would need to do are like this, this, and this. You need to go to the western woods of the house. You need to find like some birch trees in like a little coven circle, and you need a dead chicken, and you need to like set up a trap for it. And he also says that he is currently going out on patrol, and that hypothetically, if anyone were to be in trouble and need assistance, that he would hear a scream and he would have to go, you know, investigate and help out. And this whole time he's polishing one of his fancy boy knives, and he just sets it on the table, and Feyre's like, great, thanks, picks it up, heads out the door, off to find herself a dead chicken. She gets all the stuff she needs. She goes out to the woods, she finds a nice little location, sets up a trap, then waits in a tree. After a little while, who comes by but a surreal? It's caught in her snare, and she runs down and like it's got her bow and arrow and is like, you're gonna answer all my questions. And this thing is like fucking terrifying. It's like just like a skeletal person. It like it has a mouth, but it doesn't have like lips, so it's just like it's like those like dentist things. It's just that on like gray skin. It's got fucking like tattered robes. It's real creepy. She asks it, can she go home? Is there any loophole in the treaty? And it's like, no, there's no loophole in the treaty. Like, you're stuck here, babes, not without endangering your family. And she's like, ah, shit, can't do that. She also asks about, you know, like Tamlin, where she is. And the serial's like, oh, well, the High Lord of the Spring Court, Tamlin. She's like, the High Lord of the Spring Court. She thought he was just some rich guy. Turns out he's the fucking High Lord. And she has been fucking disrespecting him left, right, and center. And she asks about the Blight. Basically, the serial says, if you stay with Tamlin, he will keep you safe. She's like, oh, okay, so like leaving isn't really an option. She also asks, you know, like what else is going on. The serial says that the King of Hybern, that country that's off the west coast, he's been sending these creatures over. That's where they've been coming from. And that she betrayed him and he's not happy about it. And she's like, the she? Who is the she? Now, before she has time to inquire on that further, she realized that like everything's gone silent. There's, you know, no birds chirping, no winds howling. Oh shit, something's coming. The serial's like, I need to leave, like we are not safe. And lo and behold, up through the woods comes a group of 4 monsters called Naga. Now I imagine them strolling up, just fucking like sharks in the just like snapping their way through the forest up to Feyre and the serial, and they're like, well, what do we have here? Feyre is thinking all of this through, and she's like, oh shit, this is bad news. She's like, I've got one way out of here. She screams, takes her bow and arrow, shoots the snare that was holding the serial so that the serial could, you know, like not be massacred, and then takes her other arrow, shoots one of the Naga, and then books it out of there. The one Naga that she hit was killed. The other 3 fucking start legging it after her. They're chasing her down. She's like bobbing and weaving through the woods. They get to this point where she like fucking trips and falls or something, I don't remember. But she's on the ground and one of the Naga like is like on top of her. They're all like, you know, baring their teeth. And she takes out her knife and fucking slits this guy's throat and like blood is poured all over her. She tries to get up and run again, but something hits her in the back of the head. She falls down. She's severely concussed, and these other 2 are absolutely gonna like destroy her. But lo and behold, who comes swooping in but your wolf boy Tamlin. He comes like ripping through the woods, fucking like tears apart one of the Naga, and then the other one hightails it out of there. And he's like, what the fuck were you doing out here? Like, what's going on? And she's like, again, extremely concussed. He, you know, is helping like carry her back to the house. And he's like, oh, you need to like stay by the house. The woods aren't safe. Like, I'm doing my best to keep things around here safe, but like more and more stuff is coming through because of the blight. She's like, aye, aye, Captain. And now she realized that he's the fucking High Lord. Anyway, they get back to the house and Tamlin's like, you've had a rough day. Like, why don't you go get cleaned up for dinner? She goes up to her room and Alice is up there and Alice is like, you idiot. What were you doing out there? And she was like, I was trying to catch a cereal. And she's like, who told you about this? And she was like, oh, well, Lucien told me. She's like, Lucien told you? She's like, don't believe a fucking word he says. Like, that man is absolutely just like fucking with you. If you have a problem in the future, you come to me. You didn't need to get all this like dead chicken shit and like set up a fucking like coven circle in the woods. You could have just come to me and asked me and I would have told you that, you know, if you give it like a piece of clothing like Dobby, that the cereals are like more than nice and they'll just answer anything that you have. Feyre's like, ah shit, I've been played again like an idiot. Anyway, she gets cleaned up. Feyre walks back down for dinner. Lucien and Tamlin are both in there and Lucien's like, I heard you 2 had quite the afternoon. They're like not happy about it. And Lucien's like, well, regardless, like, Feyre, you look quite nice. And she's like, I thought fairies couldn't lie. I look like shit. Lucien's like, oh no, we can lie. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, everyone knows that fairies can't lie. And he's like, yeah, we lied about that. Absolutely, like 10 out of 10, no notes there. He's like, oh yeah, we said we couldn't lie, and then we just told you a bunch of lies, and you all believed them. And she's like, well, what else is the lie? And he's like, oh, iron doesn't work on us. That doesn't do anything. We just thought that was funny. But ash does work. Actually, if we're stabbed by something ash, like, it will kill us. After that, Tamlin is like, by the way, what the fuck were you doing in the woods? And Feyre is like, oh, I wanted to catch a cereal. And he's like, what? Like, why would you want to do that? And she's like, well, I wanted some answers. And he's like, we could have given you answers. Like, we've never willingly lied to you. And everything we said has been the truth to the most of our abilities. She's like, well, how am I supposed to know that? And he pulls out the fucking like lists of words that she scribbled down in the library. And he's like, well, what's this about? Like, what the fuck is this supposed to? And she like will not admit that those are the words that she can't read. And she just like gets up to leave. And he's like, I know you're trying to write your family. Like, they must mean a lot to you. Tamlin says, like, I want you to know that, like, I really am taking care of them. You don't have to worry about them at all. Tamlin also is like, if you want to write them a letter, I could help you. And she's like, I don't need your fucking pity. And he's like, I'm not insulting you, fellow living being. I'm trying to offer you some help here. And Tamlin's like, if your family didn't appreciate you, it's their loss, and that's not on you at all. And Feyre is still like, I don't want your pity. I don't want to be coddled. And he's like, I'm not offering you pity. I'm just trying to be your friend. Like, can we be friends? She's like, okay, we can be friends. At this, Feyre's like, you know, since we're friends now, and if I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of my life, there is one thing that you can get from me. And Tamlin's like, yeah, what's that? And she's like, I like painting. He's like, you like painting? And she's like, yeah, I want some like paint supplies. I want a hobby. And he's like, all right, you want paint? You got paint. I will order them for you in Faerie Amazon, and we will get you your paint. And she says, thank you and good night. Now, once again, she goes up to her room, is going to sleep, and Tamlin's leaving to go hunt down the rest of the Naga that are out there. As she's going to sleep, she just hears like this awful fucking scream, and she bolts out of bed and like runs into the hallway and like, what the fuck was that? And Lucien's out there and he's like, what the fuck was that? Bursting through the front doors is Tamlin as a beast, and he's carrying this other fairy, one of like the lower classes of fairies. This fairy's like screaming screaming, covered in blood, and she looks at the fairy, and it has no wings. It has like stumps where the wings would be coming out of its back, but they were fucking like ripped off. It's jagged and bloody. She's like, oh my god, what happened? Tamlin's carrying this fairy in, and he's like, clear place on the table, like there's no time to get to the infirmary. Lucien clears a spot on the table. Tamlin sets the fairy down, but there's just like blood everywhere. There's screaming. It's gory. And Lucien takes one look at the fairy, throws up, and like hightails it out of there. Feyre is like, holy shit, you know, like we have to try to save this guy. Tamlin's trying to use his like magic fairy powers to heal him, but it's no use. There's like no stopping it. There's like blood pooling all over the floor. And Feyre, who hates fairies, goes up and is like holding onto the fairy's hand, is like, you're gonna be all right. Stay with me through this. Soon she realizes that there's no point. Like this guy is not gonna make it. She is just looking at him and is like, stay with me. Keep looking at me. You're gonna be all right. Tamlin stops trying to heal him and goes up and takes his other hand and starts praying for him, like doing this little like, you know, like fairy prayer to their god, the cauldron. They just like sit there and console the fairy as they watch like the life drain out of his eyes and he dies. Then Feyre sits there for a few more minutes still holding onto his hand, and Tamlin has to take her away and be like, you know, like he's gone. Let's get you back to sleep. And he's like leading her back up the stairs, and she's like, wait, we can't leave his body here. And Tamlin's like, I know, I'm going to take care of it. Even though this fairy, like no mask, so it's not part of his court, it's not one of his people, he's still gonna, you know, treat it with kindness and give it as much of a respectable burial as he can. Feyre goes back to her room and she looks out the window and she sees Tamlin carrying this fairy's corpse back out into the woods to be buried. The next morning, Feyre wakes up, she walks downstairs, and there's not like a spot of blood anywhere. She walks into the dining room with Tamlin and Lucien, and they're all just kind of like very sullen. Things were rough last night. And Tamlin's like, hey, you know what would cheer up the mood? Beach episode. We're all just gonna like go hang out in a meadow, decompress after a stressful night. So they gather up the horses. Lucien, Tamlin, and Feyre head off to this meadow spot to have, you know, like a little nice picnic, relaxing day. They like go all the way there in silence. They get there. They're all, you know, like sitting on the ground chatting. Tamlin or Lucien, I forget which one of them, is like, so you find out anything good from the cereal? And Feyre's like, sure, I found out some good stuff. Tamlin likes getting his fucking like ears scratched as a wolf and likes belly rubs. And they fucking burst out laughing. And they're like, oh my god, like you have a personality, you have a sense of humor. And she's like, I can be funny. It really helps lighten the mood on the whole situation. Tamlin, once again, is like, hey, you want to come with me? I know a place that I think you'd like. So Feyre and Tamlin go off. They leave Lucien behind, and they head over to this lovely little like pool that's over a hill, and it's just like filled with like starlight. It's like dazzling and magical. And Tamlin starts like taking off his shirt, and he's like, you want to go for a swim? And Feyre's like, no, I do not. He's like, oh shit, and just kind of like puts down his hands and is like, all right, casually half wearing a shirt. And Feyre's like, what the fuck happened with Lucien yesterday? That was quite the reaction. So Tamlin tells Feyre about Lucien's whole like backstory. Now, Tamlin is the High Lord of the Spring Court. Lucien's father is the High Lord of the Autumn Court. Lucien has, I think, like 4 or 5 older brothers. Anyway, Lucien's like the youngest, and Lucien did not show like any interest in ruling. So instead of trying to be, you know, like the best warrior or anything like that, he just went out gallivanting across the land, spending time with all of the other courts, making friends, going to parties as one does. And he fell in love with another fairy, one of the regular fairies, not one of the high fae, which to his family was a big no-no. His dad being a real shit stain, and his absolutely awful older brothers, they called Lucien and his girlfriend to the court. 2 of his brothers like held Lucien back and then made him watch as the father executed his girlfriend in front of him. Oh my god. And so Lucien obviously was just like fucking devastated by this, decided to leave, and then was like chased down by 3 of his other brothers who wanted to like kill him to get him out of the way so that it would be, you know, one less person vying for the high lordship eventually. 3 of these brothers were sent after him, and only 1 came back. Feyre's like, oh my god, like Lucien killed 2 of his brothers. Tamlin's like, no, Lucien killed one of his brothers, I killed the other one, and he's just like been here with me ever since, and he's my best friend. And Feyre, once again trying to lighten the mood, it's like, I think we should go swimming now. So both of them jump in the pool and have a nice little time after that horrifying backstory. Now, as they're swimming around in the pool, it's just the perfect time to have a little, heart-to-heart conversation whilst naked and wet. So, of course, Feyre starts telling Tamlin about her family and how, like, they used to be rich and her dad's whatever business he had kind of crumbled up and their mom died, and she promised the mom that she would keep the family together. And they have their nice little swim, they go back to Lucien, they have a nice little picnic, and then they pack it up and they go home. Now, on the way back to the house, Lucien and Feyre kind of hang back from Tamlin. They have very good hearing, so Feyre has to be, like, extra careful, not to fucking blow her cover all the time. Feyre, like, leans over to him and is like, hey, thanks for all the advice you gave me about the cereal. And Lucien's like, oh, sorry about that. She's like, I'm joking. I get it. I killed your friend. I moved into your house and now you have to deal with me all the time. Like, I get it if you don't like me. He's like, I don't understand how you could, like, forgive me that easily, like, when I almost got you killed. And she's just like, don't worry about it. Lucien's like, Tamlin told me that your first shot when the Naga got there was to release the cereal. And Lucien goes, the bird just shit on me. You piece of shit. Lucien is like, you don't like fairies, why would you go to save one? And Feyre's like, it's the right thing to do. Like, of course I would, save someone, like an innocent creature. Lucien's like, well, I know a lot of fairies who wouldn't even do that for their own kind. And then he says, like, I did hear you scream. I did run to save you. Like, I hesitated for a bit, but not for long. And I did come to save you. But by the time I got there, Tamlin was already there. The next day, Feyre wakes up. The sun is shining. Her paints have arrived. Before he gives her the paints, Tamlin brings her to another side of the manor, and it's like he opens like these doors and it's like a massive painting gallery, and she's like, holy shit, like, like, you cleaned all this up for me, like, that's why you're being so nice. And he's like, well, like, we have it here, at least someone should enjoy it, and you clearly do. She spends like hours in there looking at all these like beautiful murals, everything like that, and then he leads her to another room that he had set up that's like her own little private painting room. She has a ton of art supplies and she just sits in there, she just paints all day, and she is happy as a clam. Now, she loves painting so much that she just sits in there like day after day and just paints all day long about anything and everything. After a few weeks, she gets hit with this wave of guilt. She realizes that she is sitting there enjoying herself and she hasn't, heard from her family. She doesn't know if they're okay. After a particularly moody dinner that night, she excuses herself and goes off to a rose garden that's in the backyard, and Tamlin follows her. She expresses her feelings. I feel so guilty. I didn't think about them, but also I spent all of this time like worrying about them. I spent my entire life trying to keep them safe, and like they haven't done shit for me. None of them have even tried to come get me. I did all of this for them and they would not do it for me. And she pulls a fucking rose off the bush and she cuts her little finger on it and then she throws it back away. And then she's like, I'm sorry for complaining about this. Like, you have a whole court to take after, and like, I'm just having my silly little problems. And Tamlin's like, no. If they're important to you, they're important to me. And like, your feelings are valid. And he picks the rose out from the bush that she threw away, and he like tucks it behind her ear, and there's the thorns are gone. Tamlin's like, like, you still don't have to worry about your family. I put a little magic spell on them. Like, they think you went to see like a rich great aunt and you're taking care of her. Like, there's a reason they haven't come to get you. They don't suspect anything. They are more than taken care of. I would not take away someone's only source of food and livelihood and just like throw them out on their own. And then he takes her little hand that's bleeding from the rose and he gives her a little smooch on the finger, and the wound heals itself. After that, he promises that, like, in due time, everything will make sense, and he leaves, and she goes to sleep, feeling a little bit warm and fuzzy. She's starting to like him a little bit, methinks. The next day, she's still a little bit gloomy, and is also a little bit embarrassed about talking to Tamlin the night before. So after breakfast, she heads off into the woods and she kind of feels like someone's following her. So she sets up a snare and then hides out in the tree again, and fucking lo and behold, who is following her but Tamlin. He gets caught in the trap. He's like, you know, like ankles up above his head, like hanging in the tree, like, and she just waltzes out and is like, oh, what are you doing there? And he's like, you piece of shit. He gets himself down. It's very agile. He pulls out the sheet of paper and he hands it to her. And again, your girl's illiterate. She can't read. And he's like, well, let me just read it for you. And he starts reading off like a fucking dirty poem to her. And she was like, what was that? Where did that come from? And he's like, oh, like the list of words that you threw away, I made them into poems for you. And he goes ahead and like reads her all of the poems he wrote, and like, oh no. He reads all of the poems and they're progressively just getting like hornier and hornier. They're having a good old laugh. She feels way better. And so they walk back, you know, through the woods to go home. On the way back, they get to talking and Tamlin's, you know, like telling her about his family, that he was the youngest child. He never expected to be, you know, the Lord one day. He joined like the Faerie military so that he could help out his dad's court, and that his dad was just as mean as Lucien's dad and his brothers were just as mean, like if not worse. And so he's like, I, you know, like never wanted this. If it makes you feel any better, my family wouldn't have come to protect me either. And she's like, oh, well, like what happened to your family? What changed? And Tamlin says that one of the rival courts killed his whole family and he was the only one that was like spared. Therefore, like he's the only one left to be the High Lord. And she's like, oh, that's awful. And he's like, yeah, I mourn for my mother, but you know, the rest of them, that's a bummer. And then on their way back, Feyre spots someone making bonfires and she's like, ooh, what is that? And Tamlin says, oh, tonight is the like spring equinox, like we have this huge festival and it's when like the magic is re-sown into the earth, if you will, and that's what, you know, makes everything magical. And she's like, oh, that sounds like so much fun, am I invited? And he says no. She's like, oh, okay. Does not say why she's not invited. He just says no, and she just takes it at face value. Once they get back to the house, they're walking through the gardens and everything goes quiet again. And Tamlin's like, oh shit, something's wrong. It's like, go hide in the bushes. And he like books it around the corner of the house. A few seconds later, him and Lucien come fucking like strolling back around in the gardens. And she just like hears this like flapping and like feels this wind, and all of a sudden they're like talking to some invisible force, and this thing called the Ator starts talking to Lucien and Tamlin. It's saying things like, your time's almost up, and are you going soft? That stone cold heart of yours finally melting? And they're like, get out of here, like go tell her we're not interested. So the Adder leaves. Feyre is like, what the fuck? And Tamlin's like, there's a glamour over you so that you are hidden from them, like don't worry, you are protected. And they go off their separate ways for the evening. Now the next day, Feyre wakes up, she goes to do her little painting, and then in the afternoon she comes out and it's the day of the festival, and she walks through the house. There's like no one in there, everyone's already like left to go to the party, and she sees Tamlin standing in the hallway. He is shirtless, he is covered in body paint, and he has a sash with knives in it and a fucking quiver on his back. She's like, what do we have going on here? And he's like, it's a ritual for the festival, like I have to participate in a ritual as the High Lord. Again, does not say anything beyond that. You're not invited, you need to stay in your room and lock the door and don't come out. Again, she also does not ask any questions, and he books it out of there. She goes back to her room, locks the door, stays in there for a while, and then is like, no, I am an independent woman. I like to party, and I'm gonna go to this goddamn party. So she leaves and gets like a little cloak to disguise herself and waltzes on down to the party that's going on outside, and it's fucking filled with fairies. There's like everyone's going around. No one really notices her, so she's just like strolling around, and she notices that there's this cave that is like all decked out, and people are fucking like lined up outside the cave, like crowding the entrance. She's like, oh, something must be, you know, like going on in there. Oh, Lord give me strength. Anyway, Feyre is, like walking around this party. She notices that everyone at the party is also wearing masks, so they all must be from, the spring court. She starts to wander away from the party. She's like, oh, I'll head back over to the woods or whatever, try to make my way back home. And these 3 fucking guys come up and they grab her. And they're like, hey, baby, where you going? Like, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh no. She tries to like get help, but no one is around and like everyone's too preoccupied, and they start fucking luring her to the woods, and she is freaking out, and I'm freaking out because I hate this. And all of a sudden, this man pops out of the woods and goes up to these 3 guys and is like, can I help you, gentlemen? And the 3 of them are like, oh shit, and book it out of there. They do not think about her twice. They just leave. And she is fucking terrified, obviously. She looks at this man and describes him as the most beautiful man I've ever seen.
Oh, wait, no. It's just a very beautiful man.
Tamlin, who? This man, he's got black hair, he's got purple eyes, and he is not wearing a mask, so he is not from the spring court. He starts questioning her. He's like, oh, you're a human. Like, how did you get here? And Feyre is like, oh, I'm here with my friends. Like, they're off getting drinks. And he's like, yeah, sure. And she kind of like cuts him off and is like, no, like, I'm gonna leave now. And he like drops it and is like, okay, well, enjoy the party, and kind of like slinks off. And she's like, what the fuck was that? She goes back to the party where there's like safety in numbers, and Lucien finds her, and Lucien runs up and grabs her and is like, what the fuck are you doing here? She's like, I wanted to come join the party. He's like, we told you to stay at home. Why didn't you listen to me? And she's like, I don't understand what the problem is. He fucking picks her up and literally like sprints her back to the house with like super fast fairy speed, and is like, you need to go inside. You need to like lock your doors and you need to not come out. She's like, what the fuck is going on? Why is no one telling me what's happening? And Lucien says that this is all part of like the spring ritual, that what they do to like sow the seeds of magic into the world is they have the High Lords all take a fucking like Viagra mushroom. This is where it starts to get weird, y'all. And they're all like hopped up on sex juices, and I don't know if they like hunt something down or whatever, and then they come back and all the High Lords have to pick like a fairy maiden to have sex with in the cave while everyone else watches, and that's what like gives the land the magic for the year. And then after that, basically everyone else like has an orgy, and that also contributes to the magic of the land. And she's like, what the fuck? And Lucien says when they take the Viagra mushrooms or whatever, they can't control themselves. Like, it's not the same person that it was. Like, the nice Tamlin you knew, he's gone. It is just like pure like horny male instinct. And like, if he fucking gets a whiff of you anywhere, he's gonna like hunt you down. Like, that's why you need to like stay in your room, lock the door, and like, because if he can't find you, he'll just like move on to someone else. The whole thing will go off without problems. And she's like, why did no one tell me this before? So she goes back inside, she locks her door, and she just like waits out the party. Now at like 2 a.m. she's like, all right, the party's died down, whatever, I'm hungry, I'm gonna go to the kitchen, get a snack. She waltzes on down to the kitchen, gets herself a snack, and then as she's going back upstairs, she sees someone moving in the shadows. And who is it but Tamlin? He strolls on up to her. It's like, what are you doing out of your room? She's like, I was getting a snack. And he's like, I told you to stay in your room. The stuff is still in my system. And she's like, okay. And he, oh my god. I hate this part of the book so much. He pins her to a wall and is like, the girl I just slept with, like, she liked it rough. And he's like, but I can go slow for you. Feyre is like, what the fuck is going on? She kind of like pushes him off, and she's like, what the fuck? And he responds by biting her. He like bites her like right here on the neck, like really hard, enough to leave like a massive bruise. And then he kind of like pulls back and is like, eh. She fucking slaps him and is like, how dare you, because good for her. And then kind of like slinks back off and like goes back off into the shadows. And she goes back to her room. I hate this part of the book. This is the worst part of the book. I hate it so much. I read this and I was so pissed that I put the book down for like a full 2 days and considered not reading it again because I just hate this. I hate this so much. There's nothing about these like 2 chapters that doesn't infuriate me. The next morning, Feyre wakes up and she has this giant bruise on her neck, obviously. She goes to get dressed. She wants to like wrap it in a scarf to hide it and then is like, no, I have nothing to be ashamed about. I didn't do anything wrong. Like, I'm gonna fucking wear like, you know, a v-neck and like everyone's gonna see what Tamlin did. So she strolls on down, walks in, and Lucien and Tamlin are in there. And Lucien's like, holy shit, what happened to your neck? And she's like, ask Tamlin, he did it. And Tamlin is fucking sitting there, smug as a bug. And he's like, oh, we ran into each other last night on festival night. I was a little bit inebriated. And she's like, a little bit fucking inebriated? Like, are you kidding me? He's like, well, I'm not in control of my actions, so therefore I'm not responsible for them. She's like, you're not responsible. Are you fucking kidding me? She's like, you cannot be serious. Tamlin's like, well, we did tell you to stay in your room, and him and Lucien fucking laugh about it. They're giggling up a storm, and she calls them pigs and walks out of there. She goes off to her painting room so fucking pissed, and she's like, I cannot believe this. I hate them. And after like 20 minutes, she's like, well, they were giggling. Tamlin was back to his normal self. Like, I'm so happy to have my boys back. What? I cannot believe this. This is infuriating.
Disgusted, I am revolted, I dedicate my entire life to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and this is the thanks I get?
Sarah J Maas, I am watching you. The whole point is that that is strike 1 and 2. You better watch yourself. Otherwise, I am throwing this entire series out the window. And you know, okay, the worst part about any of that is that like they never fucking apologize. Like, it's never brought up again. Literally, this is the entire like apology scene that we get. We apologized at dinner. That's it. That's the entire apology excuse bullshit that we are given for this. I will not forget this and I will not forgive it. Look at my notes. It just says, I hate this. All right, we're moving on. So the next day, Feyre has completely forgiven the incident that occurred and decides that for dinner, she wants to wear a nice dress. So she gets all dressed up. She walks down to dinner, goes in, and Lucien's like, holy shit, you look really nice. By the way, I gotta go, and just fucking like excuses himself out of there. She sits down at the table with Tamlin. It's like a long table. She's on one end, he's on the other end. And she's like, you're a bit far away. Wouldn't you like to come closer? He's just there on the other side. He snaps his fingers and the whole fucking table just like zippers shut. You can still do all of that even though your magic's being drained by the blight. And he's like, yeah, like it's a lot harder now, but like I still got a few little tricks up my sleeve. This is so infuriating. They have their nice little intimate dinner. She's like, hey, I want to show you something, and leads him to her painting room. And she opens up the doors and it's all dark in there. And she's like, oh, light the candles with your magic. And he does, but it takes a really long time. And she's like, oh, like his magic must be very drained for it to take that much effort to light a few candles. Maybe things are worse off than I thought. Anyway, she brings him into the gallery and she has like all of her paintings like, you know, pushed up against the wall, whatever. And then she has one on an easel that she shows to him. And he looks at it and he's like, oh, it's like the starlight pool that we were swimming in. And she's like, oh yeah, like I drew it for you, like you can have it. And he's like, that's nice. And then immediately starts looking around the room at her other paintings, starts like flipping through them. She's like, oh no, don't look at those. And he recognizes one and is like, oh, this is like the woods outside of your house. He's like, oh, and this is like the inside of your cottage back at home. And he is looking at them. And she obviously meant to give him like the pool one, and he just picks up the woods one and is like, I want this one. She's like, really? Why? And he's like, it makes me remember that I'm not alone. Up until this point, it has never been stated whether or not Feyre is good at painting. They say that she paints a lot and that she likes painting, but it's never stated that she's good at painting. I choose to believe that she is just bad at painting. I want her to have the art level of like a middle schooler that is just drawing anime pictures. I want her room and, you know, like the thousands of dollars or whatever that Tamlin spent on art supplies to just be filled with just absolute shit paintings. That's what I choose to believe, and Sarah J Maas can fight me on that. The next day, after the whole painting dinner, Tamlin and Feyre go off to a meadow once again, and they're on their own. Lucien's out patrolling the border, or whatever he does. They're sitting there, and they're kind of like lounging, and Feyre's like, what are you thinking about? And he's like, oh, I'm listening to like the willows sing. She's like, I can't hear anything. And he's like, well, that's because you're a human, and humans have like worse senses. Like, all of us fairies can, you know, sense things that humans can't. She's like, well, I want to be able to sense all of these things. Like, how can I make that happen? He's like, I can make that happen for you. And she's like, oh, you know, like you fairies, you always like to barter for things. You never give anything for free. Like, what's it gonna cost me? And he goes, a kiss. She is like, okay. So he's like, oh shit, really? So he like kneels down in front of her. He says like, close your eyes. She closes her eyes, and he kisses both of her eyelids. And then when she opens them, she can see like a whole fucking like array of new colors. Like everything looks magical. She can hear, you know, birds from a mile off. She can hear the willows singing or whatever. And she looks at Tamlin, and he's like even more beautiful than before. He looks the same, but he's like glowing with like a godlike aura around him. She's like, wow, he's so beautiful. And she tries to take off the mask that's still on him. Did you forget about the masks? Because I constantly do. She's like, I want to see the real you. And it doesn't work. And he's like, I've tried, like we've all tried, like it's not gonna work. She's like, okay, cool, well, thanks for the new powers. Every time that the magic has been like committed or like enchanted or whatever, she's smelled a very strong like iron smell, like a very metallic-y smell. And now since he glamored her, whenever there's magic, it smells like flowers and it's wonderful. After he does that, he's like, so my kiss. And she just fucking like grabs his hand, like smooches the back of it, and is like, there, we're done. And he's kind of like, oh, but doesn't say anything about it. All of a sudden she is like overcome with tiredness, and she's like, I need to take a nap. And she just like lays back down on the blanket or the grass or whatever and goes to sleep. And while she's like dozing off to sleep, she hears Tamlin say that she is everything that he ever hoped that she would be. Oh, that other chapter didn't exist. We're moving past it. When she wakes up again, she is back at her bed in the manor. And she's like, oh, Tamlin must have carried me home. She sees like a little fucking like gremlin scurrying around in the corner of her room. And it's got like skin like bark. And she's like, holy shit, what the fuck is that? And where's Alice? The creature starts laughing at her. Is like, I am Alice. Turns out she's like been glamored this entire time that she's been in Prithian. That's basically made everyone look like a human. So like the high fae, they already look like people, but all of the other fairies, you know, they look like magical creatures. She also like looks out the window, and there's like a ton of servants everywhere. She finds Tamlin, and Tamlin explains that he had glamored her for her own protection, to like, you know, make things less traumatizing for her, and also to kind of hide her away. So he glamored her so that everyone, you know, like outside of the court, they couldn't see her and she couldn't see them. She's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why she couldn't see the adder when it like flew down and was talking to Tamlin and Lucien, is because she's protected by this glamour. Good to know. Feyre, she's like, I want to go painting out in the gardens. She walks out to the gardens with all of her painting supplies and looks on like the fountain in the gardens. There's a fucking head on a spike in the middle of the fountain. She screams, drops all of her shit, and Lucien and Tamlin come running. Now, at this point, I thought the book was going to turn into like a horror book. I thought they were going to say something like, the head's been here the whole time, like you were just glamored, you couldn't see it. And it turns out like, you know, that everyone's a monster and like she's actually like being kept there. Oh, another thing about Tamlin's family that I forgot is that his dad and brothers used to own human slaves. Like they enslaved people, and Tamlin's like, I'm not like that. I would not enslave a human. Slavery's wrong. He's like, you know, they were bad people. They were my family, so it's kind of sad that they're dead, but like they were not good people. Back to the fountain. Feyre sees this head in the fountain, and Tamlin's like, look away. And Lucien like climbs up into the fountain and like fucking like tears the head off the spike and like carries it back down. He's like, this isn't one of our people. It must have been put here by like the Night Court. And Tamlin explains that like the High Lord of the Night Court like likes to fuck with him. Like they don't get along, and that he did this as a prank. It's just a prank. And that he's just trying to like get them rattled and, you know, say that like, oh, we were this close to your home in the middle of the night, like we can do anything. But Tamlin's like, as long as you're here with me, you're gonna be safe. At that, Tamlin leaves and is like, people were able to get past the border, so I gotta go check on that. So him and Lucien leave that night to go, you know, check the border. Okay, the next day she wakes up and she's still upset because they're gone, but is like, they're gonna be okay. After a while, Tamlin and Lucien are supposed to come back. Now, today is the day of another festival. So this one is the summer festival. She's painting in the morning, and then she hears like Lucien and Tamlin getting back. She's like, oh, thank God they're okay. She like runs back to her room, like has Alice like change her up all real nice because she's covered in paint. And she like puts her in a dress. She does her hair. She gives her a little flower crown and everything. Feyre fucking like waltzes down the staircase to see Tamlin and Lucien coming in. And Lucien's like, holy shit. He's like, you look like a fae. You look so good. And he looks it out of there. And Tamlin's like, oh, you do look really good. She's like, I know, let's go to the party. Once the three of them get down to the party, Tamlin's like, oh, I've got some, you know, like lord things to go take care of, but like you and Lucien like hang out, have a good time, enjoy yourselves. Lucien tells Feyre not to drink any of the wine. He's like, this is not normal wine, this is fairy wine. You should not drink any of it. The food is fine, but don't drink the wine. And Feyre's like, you can't tell me what to do, and fucking like sneaks a glass behind his back and gets just hammered immediately. Lucien's like, God damn it. And so she is just like so fucking out of it. She runs over and there's all these people like dancing to music playing, and she just like hops in and starts dancing and is like, ooh, carefree manic pixie dream girl. She notices that there's like a really hot guy playing I think it's like the violin or the viola or something like that. She is like, oh, he's so hot. And she is like describing him and like realizes it's Tamlin, and he's just like looking at her as he's playing music, and she's like, he could have been a musician in another life. And Lucien like runs up and is like, Feyre, get back here. And Tamlin's like, no, like don't worry about it, Lucien, like I'll watch after her, you go have fun. And Lucien's like, good riddance, and fucking gets out of there. Tamlin stops playing, he gets up, and they start dancing together. And after they're dancing for a bit, Tamlin pulls the I know a place. Good God, this man knows too many locations. They go off into like the forests, and it's much less dangerous this time. And they go out, it's like the middle of the night, and they're in this field, and like all of these like illuminated little like will-o-wisp things start like floating up in the air, and they start slow dancing, having a lovely time. And it's beginning to turn into the sunrise. Again, Tamlin pulls the I know another place we can go, takes her to the tertiary location. First of all, you never go to the secondary location. You especially don't go to the tertiary location. Anyway, Feyre and Tamlin go off to another like little hill overlooking all of the lands, and they watch the sunrise together. And Tamlin's like looking all at her, and she's like, what are you thinking about? And he's like, I really want to kiss you right now. And she's like, so do it. And then they make out, and then they make out some more, and they're just sitting there fucking sucking each other's faces as the sun's rising, and the birds are singing, the world is alive. In my notes, I just wrote, kids be smooching. In the like wee hours of the morning, they go back to the manor, they both fall asleep separately, and then they stumble on down to like breakfast. And Lucien starts like teasing them and is like, oh, like you two were back awfully late last night. What did you get up to? And these two are the fucking worst sort of couple. They're just like sitting there like gazing at each other like, like holding hands like, the most insufferable couple, you know. And Lucien drops the hard dose of daily news on Tamlin and is like, we've got word from Day Court, one of the other courts, I don't really care. The blight struck one of the other courts, and they've taken 24 younglings. And Tamlin's like, no, not the younglings. and it's really bad. You know, the blight's getting worse, and all of a sudden, Tamlin jumps up out of his seat and starts fucking growling like a dog. He's looking at the door. He snaps at Lucien. He's like, Lucien, get her over here. Like, get her over to the curtains. So Lucien, like, grabs Feyre, runs her over to the curtains, and is, like, fucking, like, body blocking her against the wall. In a second, both of them just, like, snap to, like, actor's mask on. They're just kind of, like, hanging out, lounging, and in walks the beautiful man from before. And he just fucking like strolls up on in and is like, how's it going, everyone? Tamlin is not happy to see him. He's like, what do you want, Rysand? His name is Rysand. Calling over. He's like, oh, like so formal. It's like, I thought we were closer than that. He's like, what do you want, Rhys? Or Rice? Rhys. We're gonna go with Rhys. Like, what do you want, Rhys? And he's like, she sent me, like, your time is running out. Lucien starts fucking, like, smack-talking him. What are you doing here? You're just Amarantha's whore. Feyre is like, that must be the she everyone's talking about, is this lady Amarantha, and, like, this fucking attractive crow man, he must be a part of that, too. And Rysand is just like, oh, whatever. And he fucking turns to Tamlin and is like, oh, Lucien's got some tongue on him, like, you should consider punishing him. And Tamlin's like, no, fuck off. They have just a very tense conversation where nobody's having fun, and they're like, get out of here, dude, nobody wants you here. He like doesn't see Feyre at all. He like looks at Lucien, but Feyre, you know, smells the magic smell in the air and is like, oh, I'm being glamored. Rhys goes to leave, and he fucking looks at the table and is like, there's places set for 3, but there's only 2 of you. Like, where's your guest? And Tamlin's like, oh, you know, like, I sent them away. I heard you coming, and, like, you don't need to spoil their day. And Rhys is like, oh, sure. And he just fucking, like, whips around and, like, locks eyes with Feyre and is like, hello there. Like, who do we have here? Who's this new guest to join our party? And Feyre's like, my bowels turned to liquid. The amount of times that Sarah J Maas uses the phrase, my bowels turned to liquid, is, like, worthy of criminal action. Get a better phrase. I don't want to hear about Feyre's shits. But anyway, Rhys is like, who's this we have here? Lucien, like, without dropping a beat, is like, this is my fiance. Rhys looks at him and is like, oh, like, a human. He's like, oh, Lucien, like, I know you like to roll around with the lower classes, but, like, even for you, this is a bit low. Tamlin's, like, up out of his seat. Is like, you need to get out of here. Rhys literally just, like, fucking, like, flicks his hand, and Lucien goes flying across the room. And Feyre, like, she grabbed a butter knife on her way over. She's holding the knife. He like flicks his other hand. The knife goes flying, and he's just getting like closer and closer to her. And he's like, oh, like, what are you doing here? And she tries to move, but she's just fucking like locked into place, and she like feels something grab into her mind, and she realizes that this guy has got like mind powers. All of the fairies have their own powers, all of like the lords, you know, of the court. He's also the lord of the shadow court. Night court, he's the high lord of the night court. Tamlin's main power is turning into like a giant wolf man. His power is fucking like getting his claws in and like messing with people's minds. So he just stands there and fucking like mind grabs her, digging around in her brain, and he's like, oh, like, Tamlin, like, you should see the things that she thinks about you. Like, she thinks about you biting her and thinks about like your hands going all over the place. Feyre's like, I would die of embarrassment if I wasn't being physically restrained right now. This is humiliating. And Tamlin is behind Rhys, just like, you need to stop doing this. He gives Rhys like 47 verbal warnings and is like, you need to stop, and Rhys does not stop. Tamlin at this point is like, please do not tell Amarantha about her. Rhys is like, oh, I should tell her. Well, I'll consider it, like, if you beg. And Tamlin gets on his knees on the ground, like head to the floor, and begs Rhys not to tell Amarantha. He's like, oh, Lucien, you should do that too. Lucien gets on his knees and is again begging Rhys not to tell Amarantha about Feyre. Rhys turns to Feyre and is like, you're part of this party, like, what's your name? And immediately Feyre's like, he's gonna dig it out of my brain if I don't like give him an answer right now. And she just says, like, my name's Claire Better. And Claire was just like, you know, some friend of her sister's from back home, but she's like, this is not a safe space. So she doesn't want to give him her real name, and is just like the first name that comes to her mind. And so he's like, oh, Claire, like, it's nice to meet you, Claire. And he absolutely recognizes her from before. Tamlin is like, does this mean you're not going to tell Amarantha about her? And Rhys is just like, oh, I'll think about it, and fucking like snaps out of there, like, like just vanishes. Feyre feels like the mind grip on her release, like Tamlin and Lucien are both able to get up, and Tamlin just very calmly is like, I need everyone to get out of the room. Feyre and Lucien are both so shook up, they leave the room. Literally, as soon as the doors close behind them, they just hear Tamlin fucking like screaming and throwing shit and like smashing things. And they are both too like shook up about it themselves to do anything. So Lucien just like goes off to his own room, and Feyre goes off to hers and like curls up in bed. She doesn't go down to dinner. She's like, I'm scared. I am in over my head. I don't know what's going on. Tamlin comes up to her room, invites himself in, and like sits down on her bed. He's like, I am so sorry. He's like, I have decided that I will be sending you home tomorrow. She's like, what? At this point, he's like, I cannot keep you safe. I can't even keep myself safe. Like, the best thing for you to do right now is to leave so that you're out of harm's way. And Feyre says, okay, if that's what you think is best, I'll listen to you. Of course, they're sitting on a bed. They're both sad because they're losing each other and they feel feelings for each other. So what do? They have sex twice. Now, this was not a particularly good smut scene, but it was short, which is best because the best smut is no smut. Sarah J Maas is trying to make it hot, but it's not hot. It's just a little uncomfortable. I don't like smut scenes. That's just fine. I want to get back to the plot, please. Everyone, stop touching each other.
Hey, Professor!
Step back, I think I'm gonna vomit!
Anyway, after they're both like laying in bed, cuddling, and she's like, I'm sad about leaving. He's like, I'm sad about having to make you leave. Feyre is like, we'll see each other again. And then she falls asleep. And as she's falling asleep, once again, she hears Tamlin say that he loves her. And she drifts on off to sleep. And then in the morning, he's gone. She is talking to Alice, and Alice is kind of mad at her. And Feyre's like, oh, but like, it's not forever. And Alice is pissed. She's like, I don't like goodbyes. Feyre's like, I don't like goodbyes either. I would just prefer to walk out of here and like never see anybody again. So they're just like, goodbye. And they separate. Feyre goes downstairs, and Lucien and Tamlin are waiting for her outside with a carriage to take her off to like the mortal lands. Lucien comes up to her so fucking full of spite. He starts chewing her out. He's like, I cannot believe that you're agreeing to do this. He's like, why don't you put up more of a fight? You should stay, like, if you want to stay. And she's like, no, like, Tamlin said that this is best, and I trust him, so I'm gonna do what he says. And Lucien's like, I cannot believe this. He's like, you have been such, like, a piece of shit this whole time. Now you're not willing to be a piece of shit. And he's like, now is the time that we need for you to be a piece of shit. And he fucking goes over to Tamlin. He's like, I cannot believe you. Just keep her here for 3 more days, like, 3 more days, and we're fucking free. And Tamlin is like, no, like, she needs to go home now. Like, this is not a discussion we're gonna be having. And Lucien is like, fuck you, and just gets out of there, and he's so mad. Tamlin and Feyre go up to each other, and she's like, oh, in due time we'll see each other again. And he's like quite sad, and he's like, oh yeah, like, I'll see you again. And Feyre is also like, you can have all my paintings. Again, I think would be so much funny if she was bad at painting. It's just a bunch of garbage that she's dumping on him. And he like puts her off into the carriage, and then to her face as she's leaving, he's like, I love you. And she thinks that back, but she's like, I'm not gonna say it. I'm just gonna hold that in for myself. And leaves. Oh my God. We were so close. So she and the carriage leave. They go back into the woods outside of Tamlin's manor. She's glamored once again, so she falls asleep. When she wakes up, she's in front of this like giant mansion back in the human world, and she sees her sisters standing outside the carriage. She gets out, and they kind of like bow to her, and then they're like, oh my God, it's Feyre, like, there you are. The whole cover that Tamlin had set up was that she was like living with a rich aunt, so she has to keep that up now. So she's like, oh yes, our aunt, like, I went to care for her, and then she died, and now we have all of this wealth to ourselves. But she's also like, what the fuck happened here? Like, I knew Tamlin was gonna take care of you guys, but like, you're in a fucking mansion. Like, we lived in a shack before. Elaine, her nice sister, is like, some guy came up to Dad, like, wanting him to invest things things and he invested them and they turned out great. And then like the ships that had been lost earlier that like sank their fortune, they were found. So we have all this money and we have all this like good social standing back to us now. Feyre's like, oh, that's convenient. As they're unloading the carriage, Feyre literally has like boxes and boxes of clothing that's coming with her. And they open it up and they're just fucking full of like diamonds and gems. Tamlin literally took every single uncut gem like in the world, put them in boxes and sent them off with Feyre like the sugar daddy that he is. So when she's there, Elaine is super happy to see her and Nesta is still kind of like prickly as ever and less happy to see her, but you know, they're rich again. And the dad is also, his mood has been greatly improved. Before he was just in like a depressive state and now he's like, oh, my daughter, she's back, like we should throw a ball for you. Feyre's like, this is so stupid, like my life is crumbling, but like if you want to throw a ball, we can throw a ball. All right, I am back and sweatier than ever. Let's do this. So once Feyre is back in the human world, she is very uneasy. She constantly questions whether or not she should have left Tam and Prithian. She knows something's wrong and doesn't know what it is, but she's like, I have no way to help them, and if Tamlin says that this is best, like, I trust him. After she gets back, first day, she takes out a shit ton of money, goes into the village where she used to live, and hands out money to all of like the super poor people like Britney Spears, even if they don't want any, because obviously everyone was starving. It wasn't just her family, and she's trying to spread the wealth around like the good little socialist she's turned into. Now, while she's in town, she overhears some guy mention that one of the local houses burnt down and that, you know, everyone is trapped inside and it's awful, but he's like, but now daddy has money to buy it for me. Feyre is like, oh, that's interesting. Anyway, she keeps walking around and she runs into her old boy toy boyfriend who she used to, you know, ring-a-ding-ding with. He is now married to another girl and she sees them walk by and she feels absolutely nothing for him. She is like, oh, good for him. Like, I don't care that he's married because I have Tamlin now, and that is what we call emotional maturity. She goes home and her family's still planning the ball for her. And she's very uneasy about it, but she's like, you know, if that makes them happy, whatever, I'll go along with it. Next day, she sees Elaine outside gardening and she goes and talks to her, and Elaine's talking about, you know, how everything just sort of fell into place after she left, and like she can't remember ever thinking about the aunt before, but I guess the aunt's always been there. Then Elaine says, you know, Nesta tried to go visit you. Her carriage broke down on the way there and she had to turn around and come back. And Feyre's like, she did what? Of all of our family members, Nesta would be the last person trying to come see me. That can't be right. Later on, she's walking around and Nesta finds her, and Nesta walks on up to her and is like, what the fuck is going on here? And Feyre's like, oh, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know, I was with our aunt the whole time. Like, I heard you try to come visit me. And Elaine's like, I know the truth. I'm not a sheep. Turns out Elaine is such a stone cold bitch that the literal immortal god Tamlin, all of his glamoring magic didn't work on her because she's so like stubborn and bitter. She like knew something was up the entire time. She didn't know this aunt. Everyone was acting weird about her. So Nesta, while Feyre was gone, took all of the money that she had left over from selling the wolf pelt, went into town, hired a mercenary to go bring her to the wall, to bring her into the Faerie Lands so that she could go get Feyre back. And Feyre is absolutely floored. She's like, I thought you hated me. And Nesta's like, yeah, I do fucking hate you, but I hate our dad more. The entire time that they were impoverished, Nesta was so mad at their dad because he like wasn't working to get them out of poverty. He was just kind of in like a depressive state, you know, was gonna let them all starve. And even though like Feyre was annoying and she didn't like her, she was like, I wanted to like get him to a breaking point where he would actually try to save us, and he never did. And even now, like, he still isn't trying, but you tried. And she's like, I respect the hell out of you for that. And he also let the mom die. The mom was dying when they had money and she was sick and he didn't do anything about it. And the reason that makes her so mad is like, if he loved her, he should have done anything for her. Nesta's also like, I want to know everything that's going on. Like, why are you back all of a sudden now? What have you been doing for like the last like 6 months that you've been gone? And so Feyre tells her everything. She tells her every single thing that happened to her while she was gone. If you want to know what it was, just fucking restart the video. I am not going over all of that again. We're only halfway through this book and this has taken me like 6 hours. She tells her everything and Nesta's like, holy shit. First of all, great story. I want you to know that I dumped my like doorknob ass boyfriend. And Feyre is like, hell yes. But why? And Nesta says that when she wanted to go rescue Feyre from Prythian, she realized that her loser boyfriend, if she asked him to go with her to go save Feyre, that he would have never agreed. And she's like, you love someone, you should do anything for them. She's like, you would know. You would do anything for Tamlin, wouldn't you? And Feyre says, yes, I would. I would do anything for him. And then the second thing Nesta says is, can you teach me how to paint? So, the day of the ball comes. Nesta and Feyre are getting along much better. Nesta is still prickly as ever, but she at least has some like sympathy and a lot of respect for her. They all get ready, whatever, go party, and Nesta leaves early. Feyre also leaves because she's not feeling it. And, you know, they go to sleep and Feyre is missing Tamlin. She has just the most uneasy feeling about this. She's like, something is wrong. I can feel it in the air. Bad things are gonna happen, but I don't know what to do and I don't know how to help. The next day after the party, she wakes up, she goes down to breakfast with her family. The dad mentions that the Better estate had burned down and that he was planning on buying it and, you know, building it up to expand his wealth. Feyre is like, hold on, what happened? Like the Betters? And they're like, yeah, it was so weird. Their estate like burned down in the middle of the night and everyone was trapped inside. So they all died, but like no one could find Claire's body. And Feyre's like, oh shit. Claire was the one whose name she gave to Rhys Rice instead of her own, and she thought that she was gonna be safe. No, they fucking came for Claire. They murdered her family and they burned down her house and then they kidnapped her. And she's like, oh shit, this is bad. Like, whoever Tamlin and Lucien were afraid of, they know where I am. They're going to like the ends of the earth to fucking kill me. They are not safe. I have to go. She looks at Nesta and Nesta realizes what's going on too because she knows that she gave Claire's name and she's like, you gotta go. Feyre runs upstairs, grabs her shit and like runs back down. Elaine is like, I remember everything now. Like, Nesta told me what happened. Holy shit, you have to go. Feyre is like, Nesta, the second you hear of like anything weird happening, if someone stubs their toe, I need you to get the family and get them off the continent. Literally, like, go somewhere else. You are not safe here. And Nessa's like, yes, I will do that. And Elaine says goodbye to her. Nessa says goodbye to her. And their dad, their fucking deadbeat dad, is nowhere to be seen. He remembered too, and he left. He is off in the house somewhere. He does not say goodbye to Feyre, and Feyre does not say goodbye to him, and she fucking leaves. So she absolutely books it out of the mortal lands. She goes up to the wall, an invisible wall in the middle of the forest. She like creeps her way along, finds an opening through, and is able to go back into Prythian. I have a little quandary for you. This entire time, they have made such a point to knock Feyre out when she's going in between like the mortal realms and Prythian so that she can't find her way back. And literally the girl goes in a straight line and fucking winds up back at the manor at Tamlin's house. It's like, was it that easy all along, or is like everyone just an idiot? Anyway, she goes back, she makes it back to the house, and when she gets there, she finds that everything is fucking ruined. The house is in shambles, there's no one there, like, there's blood all over the place, there's no bodies, which is weird, and there's like shit thrown everywhere. She's literally like going through this mansion like fucking Aragorn, like sniffing out where everyone went. It's like, there was a fight over here, and then someone was dragged this way. This has never come up before. This was not established as something that she could do. So anyway, she is scooting around and then she hears some scuffling and she finds that Alice is still there. And Alice is like what the fuck are you doing here? We thought we got rid of you. Like, what are you doing back? And Feyre's like, something's wrong. And Alice is like, no shit, something's wrong. And Feyre's like, please tell me what's happening. And Alice is like, all right, come here. She brings her into the kitchen and then gives her the whole story. Buckle up with me for this one. Oh, there's so much exposition here. Alice is basically like Amarantha took everyone, and Feyre is like, you know, like, who's Amarantha? What the fuck is going on here? And Alice tells her that, she says that Amarantha is the High Queen of Prythian now. Basically, there's all, you know, 7 lords and they're masters of their domain, but Amarantha is the queen of the land, and she's a fucking bad bitch. She is so mean, and she rules with like an iron fist. She's the one that everyone's been scared of, that like Rhysand works for, who basically put the curse on them and got them all and dragged them back. And her domain is the under the mountain that we talked about before. And Alice says that prior to the war 100 years ago, all of like the lords ruled equally and everything was peaches and cream, and they enslaved humans. Anyway, when the humans fought back, Hybern, the island across the sea from them, was getting in on the war because they're like, we don't like people either. So the king of Hybern sent Amarantha, his general, across to go help them in the war against the mortals. She basically went from like court to court and was like dazzling all of the lords and like convincing them to work with Hybern against the mortals. And then while she was there, she kind of like charmed all of them into sealing away some of their power with her. So what they were talking about earlier with the blight, there's no blight. The blight is Amarantha. She literally stole like the powers of all of the High Lords and has been keeping them to herself. That's why, you know, Tamlin can't perform magic like he used to, and, you know, things are going badly. That's the same thing with all of the High Lords. They're basically all like trapped, indebted to her now because she's holding on to their power. Now, during the war, Amarantha had a sister named Clythia. Clythia was also with her in the war against the mortals, and Clythia fell in love with Jurian, who was the like human commander in charge of the human armies. Now, Clythia absolutely fucking like enamored with this man. Amarantha's like, no, this is like a bad idea, like don't do this, and Clythia's like, no, I'm in love. And Jurian was absolutely playing her like a fiddle. He was, you know, like getting all of the secrets for the fairy like cause from her and then using it against them. But Amarantha, you know, didn't want to do anything to hurt her sister, so she was basically just like, you need to be careful of Jurian. She wasn't. Eventually Jurian killed her. He like captured her and just like tortured the shit out of her until she eventually died, and Amarantha lost it after this. She went absolutely berserk. She basically like threw the entire war because she was so mad that she was like, I don't care if we lose, I'm going after this one man and this one man alone. She got in like a physical fight with him, killed him, and then took his finger and his eye and just destroyed him. Now, while this was happening, the mortals were able to fight back against them, and eventually they were able to sign a treaty, which is what started this whole thing. Basically, the reason that humans are free is because Amarantha had a grudge against this one man and fucking threw the whole thing to get back at him. And Alice this entire time is like, Feyre, you stupid fucking idiot, and says that the curse was put on Tamlin by Amarantha. She has like a personal vendetta against Tamlin, and during the war, Tamlin's awful dad and brothers were aligned with Amarantha. Some of the lords were like against Amarantha because obviously she stole their power, and others were like power hungry enough that they aligned with her and also, you know, didn't like people. So Tamlin's dad was one of the ones that signed with her, which that's a bad sign. While like the Spring Lord and her were having meetings, she was like eyeing him up as a child, and he spent a lot of time in her vicinity, and it's real gross. When the dad finally was killed by another one of the court lords, Tamlin was the only one left, so he was like obviously promoted to High Lord. Amarantha was fucking like obsessed with him, like enamored with him. He's the chosen white boy, and she was gonna have some of him. So at this point, since Tamlin was one of like the new High Lords, she hadn't like stolen his power yet. So she basically, oh my god, she's trying to fucking like lure him into being like her sex slave. I don't like it. Oh my god. But Tamlin was like not at all interested. He was like, no, first of all, I don't like you because slavery is bad, and like you're just an insane tyrant. And so basically she kept on like sending him proposals, just being like, oh, come with me, be my lover. And Tamlin was not interested. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, no. And he sent Lucien to go like turn her down one time. And Lucien, good old Two-Eye Lucien, back then they called him. And Lucien told her to go back to the shithole she crawled out of, and she carved out his eye with her fingers because of that and left his face like horrifically scarred. It was like so bad that he came back like nearly dead to Tamlin, and Tamlin, upon seeing him, just like immediately threw up and, you know, just had like a visceral reaction to it. At that point, Amarantha was like, oh, I'm sorry. You know what would be a nice thing to do to make up for this is I'm gonna throw you all a ball. I want the entire spring court to come to a ball, and since Lucien is so like disfigured now, we're all gonna wear masks so that he's not, you know, self-conscious about the scar that I gave him. We're just gonna have, you know, a nice time. Bring everyone. Tamlin and Lucien and the entire spring court went there. When they were all there, she claimed that like there could be, you know, peace between everyone if Tamlin just like decided to be her lover and stayed with her forever. And he was like, absolutely the fuck not. Like, I wasn't gonna do it before, and like after what you did to Lucien, I'm not gonna fucking do it now. Like, he said that he would sooner marry a human than sleep with her. And she's like, you wanna bet? She placed the curse on all of them, and all of these masks were stuck to their face. And she's like, you know what, like, I took your power, and there's a way to break the curse. All you have to do is, in the next 7 by 7 years, find a human who absolutely hates fairies, make sure she kills one of your friends, and then you're gonna fucking like woo her and razzle dazzle her into falling in love with you. And once she says, I love you, then like, curse is broken, you can go. But if she does not in those 7 by 7 years, first I completed 2nd grade math, you can just say 49 years, you don't need to keep saying 7 by 7. If someone does not fall in love with you in those 7 by 7 years, then you and your entire court are going to come back under the mountain with me, and you're going to be mine, and I'm going to have my way with you, and oh, I hate this. And so obviously they're all stuck. While this was happening, the first like few years of it, Tamlin was sending out people, you know, like every day over into the mortal world disguised as wolves so that someone could kill them, and then he could, you know, take back whoever had killed them. But it never worked out, and like it was never, you know, like a young girl. It was either like an old woman, or a man, It was never his type, you know. For the first 2 years, people were going out like every day, but like every single day, you know, less and less people were coming back, and Tamlin was like, I cannot keep sending like my subjects, my people out to be slaughtered every single day. And he like called the whole thing off, and he's like, we're just gonna like hunker down and we're gonna wait. And so for the next like 46 years, they just sat and they did nothing. He was like, I'm giving up on this. Like, we got to find another way to break the curse. Turns out there's no other way to break the curse. In the current time, it's the last year of the curse. People from his court started like begging him to let them leave, to, you know, like try to save everyone else. And he started to allow it again. And that's when Andres went across the wall, saw a girl aiming an arrow at him, and let himself be killed so that, you know, they could have a chance at the curse being broken. And of course, Amarantha thought that this was never going to happen, but lo and behold, we got Feyre instead, Girlboss Extraordinaire. Part of the curse was that they could, like, at no point say that they were cursed. They couldn't, you know, like, reveal anything about it to her. It had to be genuine that she fell in love with Tamlin. And Alice just really fucking lays into her. She's like, you were so goddamn emotionally constipated that you couldn't just say you love him back. Like, we all knew you loved him. But now, because you didn't say I love you back, Amarantha has come. She has abducted everyone in the court, and has taken them under the mountain, and they're all gonna be stuck there forever because of you. And so that's the whole story of how we got here. Now, when Tamlin sent Feyre away back to the mortal realms was when the curse had 3 days left in it. That's why Lucien was so pissed at her. That's why Alice was so pissed at her, was because if they could have stuck it out for 3 more days and gotten Feyre to say, I love you, then none of this would have happened, but she did not. She left without a fight, and now we're all in this horrible situation. And Alice says that, like, Amarantha's not going to stop at the fairy realm as soon as she takes over all of Prythian. Like, she's coming for you humans next. She fucking hates you. You're all going to die. And Feyre's like, oh, now my family. Oh, Tamlin's gone. She's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm gonna go fight her. She decides that she, who's just like the plainest person, is going to go under the mountain and fight a fairy queen. And so she goes up to Alice and she's like, I want you to take me there. And Alice is like, no way, that's a bad idea. And Feyre's like, no, you're gonna take me there and I'm gonna get us all out of this. All I can say to that is, hell yeah, girl, go get your man and his wolf dick. So Feyre and Alice leave and they go to this cave, different cave than before, this cave in the spring court, and Alice leaves her there. And Feyre's like, where, like, we need to go under the mountain, that's, you know, way up that way. And Alice is just like, you know, like, we're magic. You walk in this cave and you're gonna be there. Problem solved. It's a shortcut. Feyre's like, all right, well, thank you for your help. You know, I hope I see you again soon. You and your nephews. Alice has nephews that she's looking after because her sister and the sister's mate were murdered by Amarantha, and so she's been like seeking refuge with Tamlin ever since. And she's like, I have to go save my nephews. I don't care what you do. Get on out of here. Before Alice leaves, she tells Feyre 3 things. Rule number 1, do not make any deals. They will not be made in your favor and you are going to lose if you make a deal. Number 2, do not drink the wine. The wine is not for you. It is bad. Do not drink the wine. Number 3, do not trust everything you hear. There's still a part of the curse that is in play that we cannot tell you about, that you have to be on the lookout for. And Feyre is like, yes, ma'am, got it. I will see you. And Alice is like, Godspeed, bitch, you're gonna die so soon. Feyre turns around, walks into the cave. She is strutting her shit. She is in there for a total of like 10 minutes before she runs directly into the adder, the absolute like monstrous being from before that Tamlin was hiding her for. He's like, oh, what do we have here? Fucking knocks her out, drags her to the court under the mountain, and throws her in front of Amarantha.
Ladies and gentlemen, her.
The fate of the world rests in the hands of this idiot. Feyre is brought in front of Amarantha, and at this point, they have no idea who she is. They're just like, just some person who's like stalking around, you know, our cellars. Amarantha is up on like this big like podium. She has her throne up there, and standing right next to her is Tamlin. And Feyre walks in, sees Tamlin, doesn't react. He looks at her and makes absolutely no reaction. Not a single muscle twitches. There is like no recognition in his eyes. Truly, he feels nothing towards her. She walks up and Amarantha is like, oh, who's this? Like, what do we have here? And Feyre is like, I am here to profess my love for Tamlin. And everyone laughs at her. And Amarantha is like, we already got the girl. She's up there. Feyre turns and looks and just sees a corpse crucified on the walls, like flayed, absolutely mangled body hanging up there. Amarantha's like, she was the one that was in love with Tamlin. Like, we have her name and everything. And Amarantha's like, Tamlin, like, what do you think of her? Like, is this the girl that you were in love with? Tamlin does not say a fucking thing. She's like, oh, so, like, did we torture the wrong girl for nothing? It makes sense why she was screaming that she didn't know anything about this. But Amarantha's like, oh, well, then that's just fun for me. You know what, babes? I'll cut you a deal. Rule number 1. Amarantha suggests to Feyre that if she beats 3 challenges that she sets in front of her, that she can win freedom for Tamlin and his court. There's going to be like one every full moon for 3 months. And in between those like 3 months, she's going to be given household chores to do. And if she doesn't complete the chores, she gets cleared. But if she is able to complete them, you know, she gets to live another day. Amarantha also says, or at any point during these trials, you can answer a riddle for me and I'll, you know, immediately release everyone, like no harm, no foul, you'll all be good to go. But if you get the riddle wrong, I'm going to torture you like poor Claire up there and just like absolutely demolish you. And Feyre was like, okay, well, what if, you know, I fail one of the trials? What'll happen to me then? And Amarantha's like, there's not going to be enough left of you to torture if you fail those trials, so you don't have to worry about that. Feyre thinks about this for all of like 3 seconds and is like, I know that I shouldn't make deals, but my life is on the line, so I'm gonna make a deal. She agrees and is like, you got yourself a deal, Amarantha. Fucking immediately, the Adder and some other monsters come up to Feyre and just start beating the shit out of her. Like, truly, they knock her down, they like kick her in the chest, they're like on the ground kicking her, and they break her nose, and they just beat the shit out of her until she literally passes out. And oh my god, girl, you know that the fairies are going to be tricky. You could have thought for at least 1 second to make a little footnote in your amendment with the devil that I will be treated fairly in between the trials, or like you will not hurt me in between the trials, or you will not torture me or other people in between the trials. Nope, she did not think of that. She was just like, yep, sounds good. Immediately gets the shit kicked out of her. She wakes up in a dungeon and she can barely see. Her like eyes are swollen shut and everything hurts. She is all alone, but soon she hears like, you know, feels some magic in the air. And who shows up but Lucien, our main man. And Lucien is like, what the fuck are you doing here? And she's like, I'm here to rescue Tamlin and everyone. I know about the curse down. He's like, oh my god. He's like, truly, you are insufferable. He tells her that all of the courts are being held captive by Amarantha under the mountain. Previously, it was, you know, just the courts who were like aligned with her, but she went and like one by one attacked all the courts and gathered them up, and now they're all stuck here as captives for her. And that's who Feyre is fighting for. She is fighting for the souls of the entire country now. Oh, girl. Another thing about Amarantha, when Feyre sees her, she notices that she has like a bone finger necklace, and she's got this eye that's like a fucking like googly eye wiggling all around, but it's a human eye, and it's like sentient, like looking all over the place, and she's like, what the fuck is that? Lucien tells her that the finger bone and the eye both belong to Jurian, that before she killed him, Amarantha basically like locked his sentience in there, and now he lives forever as her jewelry for her to like torture. It's a bad sign for her. So anyway, Lucien, while he's there, he's able to heal Feyre, kind of. So he's like, I can't heal you enough because someone will know I was down here, and obviously I can't be down here. So he's able to like realign her nose. Her nose was the only thing that was broken. Reduce down the swelling so she can at least see, and heal up some of like major swelling. She's still like fucking bruised all over, but the pain is gone. Lucien is like, I gotta go. Guards are gonna be back soon, but I'll come to see you whenever I can. Then Feyre is brought back into the throne room and thrown in front of Amarantha again. At this point, she's like, hey, babes, if we're gonna know each other over these next 3 months, I should at least know your name. What's your name? And Feyre says nothing. She's like, I've played this game before. I don't want to do it. So Amarantha then pulls down Rhysand, her whore. And she's like, Rhysand, you were the one that told me about the human living with Tamlin. Is this the girl that you saw? And Rhysand, like, looks at her, looks away, and is like, I don't know, humans all look the same to me. Motherfucker. When he saw her at Tamlin's house, he instantly recognized her from the forest party before. He knows it's her. But anyway, he's like, I don't know who she is. And Amarantha's like, all right, whatever. And she's like, well, someone who might know her a little bit better. She snaps her fingers, and Feyre sees these like massive red-haired dudes dragging Lucien in front of the crowd. She's like, oh my god, these must be Lucien's brothers. They're fucking laughing at him. Lucien's like on his knees, and Amarantha is like, Lucien, you know her, like what's her name? Lucien doesn't answer. She's like, Rhysand, take care of that. Rhysand starts fucking like mind clawing Lucien, and he's just on the ground like frozen, cannot move, cannot say anything. But Feyre just starts to hear like little like groans escaping from him, meaning like he's in pain, and she's immediately like, stop, like my name's Feyre, like do not hurt Lucien anymore. Rhysand releases Lucien, and he's just like obviously was being mentally tortured there. Amarantha is like, oh, nice to meet you. That wasn't so hard, was it? And she sends her back down to the dungeons to wait out her days until the first trial.
2 hours later.
Oh my god, the riddle. I didn't even get to that part. When she goes back down to her cell, she is like, oh shit. What did I get myself into with this bargain? She's like, thinking back on it, she's like, did I get duped by Amarantha? Like, I know I was duped. The deal was that if I beat the challenges, they'll be released. But if I beat the riddle, everyone will be released immediately. And she's like, does the immediately count for both of them? She's going in just like a paranoia spiral. She's like, no, it counts for all of them. Like, you're overthinking it. Underthinking it is more like it. Now, a few days later is the first trial, which is my favorite of the trials. Feyre is taken out of her cell. She's brought to this like massive arena, under the mountain in this giant cave. All of like the courts are there in like the audience watching her. She's like, what's going on here? Amarantha's like, I hope you like games. And she gets the adder to pick her up, like fly her into the air and then drop her into this giant pit that's in the center. Feyre just like lands in there and is like, holy shit, what's going on? And she looks at Amarantha, and Amarantha leans down and says, run. And she hears this like massive roar, and fucking around the corner of like this maze like labyrinth comes a worm. A worm. Worms, baby. The first task is to escape the worm pit. She is put up against like this giant fucking sandworm-esque thing, and she is being chased around the labyrinth. It truly, like, it is hunting her down. It's got little, like, knives for teeth. It doesn't have any eyes, and she's just booking it. Now, as this is going on, she realizes that all of the people in the stands are placing bets on her. They're all betting on how long she's gonna live so that they can make money off of this. What tools? And while she's running, she's able to, like, squeeze into a little area to get away from the worm to have a little second of rest. While she's in there, she realizes that she can kind of keep track of the worm because all the people in the audience are looking where the worm is. So, they're off like looking like way over there. So she's like, the worm's got to be over there. Like, I'm safe for now. She starts running through the labyrinth, looking for things, falls in another giant fucking pit. Girl, please. When she lands, she gets up and realizes that it's just like a pit of mud and bones, and that this has to be like the worm's lair. And she is stuck in there. It is a giant like 20-foot cavity. All of the walls are mud, and she cannot get away out of there. She's trying to climb up. She keeps on falling down. Everything smells like shit, and it is not looking good. So, Girlboss, she looks at the bones, takes them, and starts breaking them over her knee. She then takes them and, like, uses them as, like, fucking, like, ice picks and gets her way out of the hole. Then she looks back down and is like, I got a better idea. Fucking Jimmy Neutron brain blast over here. She jumps back down in the pit and starts taking more bones and breaking them over her knee and just starts stabbing them into the ground like point side up until the entire pit is covered except for like this little like sliver runway in the middle. She then takes another one of the bones, climbs up, and once she's out of the pit, she just gets on the floor and starts rolling around in the worm shit and absolutely covers herself Walking Dead style in just like the most vile filth imaginable, and people are like, oh my god, like it's hard to watch. She then is able to locate the worm by figuring out where everyone else is looking. She also realizes that the worm is blind. It didn't see her go in the little cubby hole, and it must be hunting by scent. So she covers herself in shit. She, on the way there, she takes bones and like places them as markers, at the path to turn so she can find her way back. She walks up behind the worm, takes one of the bones, slashes her hand, and like squeezes it so all the blood's draining out. The worm immediately fucking like flips around, is like, ah, food. And instead of like lunging right at her, fucking dashes the other way. And Feyre's like, oh my god, where did it go? Like, I can't see it, but I know it's moving somewhere. Lucien, God bless Lucien. Lucien, from up in the crowd, stands up and screams like, it's on your left. And right as he does, she's able to move, and this worm comes fucking barreling through the wall, and it is chasing her down. She is legging it, making like turn after turn, getting back to the pit. She like runs, jumps, and makes a landing in that like nice little sliver that she carved there. But as she lands, like, she feels something hit her arm, but she's able to keep pushing through and like runs into like a little like covey that's in the back for some protection. And fucking right as planned, the worm comes barreling through, launches itself off into the fucking death pungy pit, and just absolutely skewers itself, and the worm is dead. Feyre's won her first task. She gets up out of the pit. Everyone is fucking like silenced, like no one thought that she was going to live. Amarantha is like, we've all been placing bets, but she's looking at the sheet and she's like, only one person bet that you would live. And you know who that one person is? Fucking Rysand. He comes down and is like all smiles and is like, I knew you could do it. Amarantha is pissed. Feyre, injured Feyre, is then brought back to her cell. She's still covered in shit. She looks down at her arm and sees a bone poking out of it. Now, at this point, I thought that, like, when she landed, one of her arms must have gone through, like, one of the bone spikes that she had sticking up. SparkNote says no. SparkNote says that she fell, compound fractured her arm, and it's her own bone that is sticking out at this point. She is in incredible pain. She's literally covered in shit. She is left in a dungeon in the dark, and she is freaking out. She like passes out, goes to sleep. She wakes up, the arm is still throbbing. It's looking bad. Like, she's still covered in shit. It's not looking good. And she's like, I cannot get an infection. If I get an infection, I am going to die, and like we're all gonna be screwed. And she's just sitting there trying to fucking placebo herself into not getting an infection. She's like, I'm not sick, I'm not feeling queasy, I'm not feeling hot, like nothing's the matter here. And let me tell you, our girl has an infection. It's not looking good. And she's down there for days, like can't move, and is like on the verge of dying when someone waltzes on into the cell. And who is it but Rysand? Rhys waltzes on in and is like, you're not looking too hot there. And she's like, fuck off. And he's like, oh, like it looks like your arm is hurt there. Like it looks like an infection to me. And she's like, no, it's not an infection. He's like, well, I could help you, but like it'll cost you. And she's like, what's it gonna cost me? He's like, I'll heal your arm, but you'll spend 2 weeks with me at the night court every single month for the rest of your life. And Feyre's like, absolutely no fucking way. You're out of your mind. I am not going with you. He's like, okay, fine. Like you can stay here. Just to let you know, I don't think Lucien's going to be able to help you. After that little outburst that he had, Amarantha was not too pleased with him. She was, trying to put him down, and it took Tamlin fucking begging her on his knees to spare Lucien's life. But Amarantha, the cruel queen that she is, like, oh, I'll spare Lucien's life, but, he does have to be punished for his little outburst for helping Feyre, so we're gonna sentence him to 20 lashes, and Tamlin, you're gonna be the one to do it. Oh, the boys are not all right. Lucien was then whipped 20 times by Tamlin and has been, like, incapacitated since. Rysand is like, you thought he was gonna come. Maybe he doesn't even want to come save you after the punishment that he got for helping you the last time. I'm your only shot out of here. And she's like, absolutely not. Shove it up your ass. I don't want to hear it. And he's like, all right, then I'll just see you. And as he's leaving, Feyre says, wait, I am responsible for every single person in Prythian now because of the bargain that I made. She's like, I will give you 5 days a month. And Rysand's like, I want 10 days. And Feyre says, 1 week. He's like, you got yourself a deal. He fucking like grabs her arm and snaps it back into place, and she passes out. When she wakes up again, her arm is healed, her fever's gone, and she has once again sold her soul to the devil. She looks down at her previously injured arm. Now where it was broken, it is just covered in like a giant black tattoo that like, you know, like swirls all the way up her arm, and on her palm is a giant eye, like the fucking Pale Man. It's a tattoo. It's not a real eye. But now she looks at it and is like, fuck, like what did I do? Like what did I get myself into? As soon as, you know, someone sees this, they're gonna know that I made a deal with Rice, and she's like, I am fucked. At that point, her little, you know, household duties start. Amarantha has someone pull her out of the cell. They throw her into this hallway, give her literally like a bucket of mud, and says like, clean the floors, scrub them till they shine. She's like, I can't do that. This is like dirty water. You didn't give me anything to clean with. And they're like, scrub it till it shines by the time we get back, or else you are getting cleared. And so they leave. She doesn't know how long she has. She's like furiously scrubbing the floors, and they're just getting dirtier and dirtier, and she is losing faith. She's like, I am going to die here. Like, this is not good. She just kind of gives up and sits in the corner. In through the doors walks a beautiful woman with lovely red hair. Feyre looks at her and is like, this must be Lucien's mother. Lucien's mom waltzes on in, and she thanks Feyre for saving Lucien's life earlier when Amarantha and Rice were going to torture him. She's like, I owe you a debt, and I'm going to pay that debt now, and that is going to be the last of it. She then walks out of the room. Feyre looks down at her bucket, and it is sparkling clean water. She gets back to scrubbing the floors, and they're finally getting clean this time. And like right as she finishes up, the guards come back in, and they're like, oh, you're done. You live to see another day. Thrown back in the cell. The next day, she is pulled out of the cell and thrown into a dark bedroom and told that in the fire grate there are lentils mixed in with the ashes, and obviously that's a problem. What she needs to do is to pull all of the lentils out of the ashes, and if she misses a single lentil, she will be cleared. Feyre tries to do this, and it is so hard that she also, you know, is on the verge of giving up. And who walks in this time while she's on the floor digging through a fire grate? Ryson. And he's like, what are you doing in my room? And she says, like, this is her task for the day. She has to clean all of this. And he's like, get up, like, get out of here. She is like, why are you working with Amarantha? Do you have no shame? And he's like, you don't think that we're all trapped here? She would have gotten us one way or another. I am just as much a prisoner here as your sweet, sweet Tamlin. And Feyre's like, oh shit, like I didn't think about that. Oh, well, you know, like Tamlin's power is turning into a like giant wolf man. It's like, is your power like the mind reading thing? The mind grabber? He's like, you think Tamlin's magic is good then? Like, you should see him at full strength. When Tamlin took over as Lord of the Spring Court, a bunch of people in the Spring Court left because they were worried that he was like so powerful that he was just gonna be a monster. And so everything you've been seeing now is like the tame Tamlin. Rice is like, oh, like you should see my power too. And he fucking pulls out like this great big old pair of like bat wings and is like, this is nothing. Like, wait till you see me at full power. And she's like, holy shit. And he's like, oh, you should feel honored. Like, I don't show my wings to just anybody. He's like, I've had enough of this conversation. He snaps and the fireplace is all clean. The bucket is filled with lentils and the guards come back in to get her. When the guards come in, Ryson is like, I've had enough of these stupid chores. He's like, none of the guards are going to make her do any more chores. If any of the guards touch her, like, I will kill you. Do you understand me? And all of the guards are like, yes, sir. They take her back to the cell nicely, and she's returned there for a few days, no more chores needing to be done. After a few nice days of solitude, Feyre is dragged out of her cell by, like, these shadow women. She is brought to a room where she is stripped naked, she is covered in body paint, and then she is given essentially like tissue paper suspenders as a dress to wear. Ryson comes in and Feyre's like, what the fuck is going on? He's like, oh, like, don't you remember our deal? It's time for your 1 week with me. And she's like, oh, fuck. And so he strolls her out in her little like tissue paper slave Leia outfit and starts parading her around the, the throne room hall where everyone is gathered. Rhys and Feyre waltz on in, and they walk up to Amarantha and Tamlin. Amarantha and Tamlin both don't make a reaction, but they do not look happy. Feyre is fucking eyeing Tamlin down, trying to see if there's, what's going on, and he's just not making any reaction at all. And Amarantha is just kind of ugh, what do you have going there? And he's like, I made a deal with her. I get to enjoy her pleasures while she's still alive. And Amarantha's like, all right, whatever. She is also clearly pissed. After they waltz around the room, Rhysand brings Feyre over to the table and is like, here's a drink of wine. And she's like, rule number 2, don't drink the wine. And he's like, you need to drink the wine. She's like, I'm not going to do it. And he's like, you need to drink the wine. And so she drinks the wine. And she wakes up back in her cell the next morning with the worst hangover in the world. She does not remember a single fucking thing that happened. In her cell, she's so sick and hungover. Lucien comes in and is like, girl, what the fuck are you doing? What did you do? And she tells him about the deal that she made with Rhysand, and he's like, why the fuck would you do that? I would come heal you. Why couldn't you just wait it out for me? And she's like, I didn't know that you were gonna come heal me. I was in a dungeon fucking dying, and I heard you were upstairs also dying, and I didn't know if you hated me after that. I wouldn't know if you would get here in time. You overestimated me before with the cereal, and I didn't know if you were gonna do it again, and I was dying. I had no choice. Lucien's like, it's okay. Of course I would come to see you. This is literally the first day that I could get up and walk. And Feyre is like, I just need to, crack whatever magic Tamlin is under to keep him from reacting to me and figure out what's going on. And Lucien's like, he's not under any fucking spell. He is his own goddamn person, whole as could be, not making a single reaction to you. And she's like, how the fuck is that possible? What do you mean? Lucien explains that he knows that Amarantha is trying to get at him by breaking Feyre, and that if he showed any, hint of emotional weakness for her, that that would be it. The game's up. At least if he can prevent any emotion from showing, he can keep himself safe, and he can keep Feyre safe from Amarantha. And Feyre's like, oh my god, that's so much worse somehow. And it is. The whole thing about the body paint. Feyre was like, what happened at the party? I don't remember anything. And Lucien's like, oh, he made you dance for him the entire time. Losing your mind, lap dances for everyone. It's best that you don't remember it. Oh my god, our girl was fucking roofied, was just forced to do that. And Tamlin was sitting there watching with no reaction. And she's like, oh fuck, this is horrible. And she is stuck like this for the rest of the week. Every single night he comes down there, retrieves her, has her painted, thrown essentially naked into the party, and paraded around. And as these go on, one day Rhysand visits her in the cell, and she's like, what the fuck are you doing this? What's the point of all this? He's like, oh, well, the paint is on you. The paint is on you because that way Tamlin can know exactly where I've been touching you, and I can fucking rile him up. Oh my god, it goes back to our least favorite chapter again. So Tamlin, when he had the body paint all over him, before for the spring party, and she saw him in the hallway after, she was like, oh, the body paint was all fucked up from the waist down from him and some other girl just plowing. Rhysand, is painting her so that everyone can see what he's getting at and, where he's touching her. First of all, putting this out there, she is not assaulted, and we'll get to that later, but just to make it clear, it is all, above the belt. She's like, what was the point of saving me if you were just gonna torture me like this? Why even bother? And he does not answer. He will not give her an answer as to why he bargained to save her life. Oh my god. During the next day's party, before Feyre has been, forced to drink anything, someone comes up to Rhysand and is like, Amarantha wants to talk to you. And Rhysand's like, oh shit. He's like, Feyre, stay by me. We're gonna go talk to her. In front of Amarantha, on their knees, is a fairy that has clearly been, tortured and mistreated and is fucking sobbing. And Amarantha is like, oh, this little one here tried to escape. And I think that this was, a whole, organized crime operation, and I think more people are trying to escape. So I need you to reach into his mind and find out what was going on there. Next to the fairy that's on the ground is the High Lord of the Summer Court, and this man is sweating fucking bullets. He is like clearly in on it, and he is losing his mind, just like waiting to be killed. Rysand reaches into the fairy's mind and looks at Amarantha and says, nope, it was just him. He was acting on his own. There is no one else involved in this. And Amarantha's like, if you say so, you say so. You know, like, take care of him. Turn his brain into soup. And what does Rysand do? He kills him. Amarantha is like, why did you kill him? I didn't say to do that. I wanted him kept alive. And Rysand said, my hand slipped. And he takes Feyre and he walks away. They go right over to the drink table. He takes a drink, she takes a drink, and he's like, let's get hammered. At this point, the High Lord of the Summer Court, like, physically, like slumps over, obviously fucking relieved that he wasn't found out. We are in month 2 of detention, and it has come time for the second trial. Our girl, Feyre, is brought to another arena, this time smaller. Walking into the cave, she sees Tamlin and Amarantha. She's looking at Tamlin, and there is no fucking reaction from him, except she notices that he is absolutely just like white-knuckling it. Besides that, there's absolutely no reaction. And she's like, oh, he does know what's going on. And she is basically picked up once again and thrown into a pit. On like 3 sides is cave wall, and then on one side is a giant metal grate that she can see through. On the other side of this metal grate is Lucien chained to the floor. Feyre looks at the wall, and on the wall there is some writing, and there are 3 levers. The second puzzle is a word puzzle for a girl that is illiterate. Lord help me. Amarantha begins the trial. Feyre's just looking at the wall, not being able to read a single goddamn word, and is freaking out. As she is standing there, on the ceiling, there are heated, like, hot metal spikes that are slowly, like, lowering down onto them, getting closer and closer. Lucien is on the other fucking side, is too far away to read to her what is on the wall, and Feyre is there panicking. She's trying to read, she cannot do it. It is not going well. The spikes are getting lower and lower. Everyone is, you know, like laughing at her, and they're like, figure out the riddle. They don't realize that she can't read. There's no riddle because she can't even read. As it's getting lower and lower, Lucien is just like, Feyre, please, like, choose one, choose any of them. There are 3 levers, so she has a 1 in 3 chance of luck being right. So she goes over to one of them and decides to pull it. And let me tell you, her logic is so stupid at this point. I have to read it to you so you can understand, like, the level of mental capacity that this girl is working with. Feyre goes over to the number 2 lever. She says, 2 was a lucky number because that was like Tamlin and me. Just 2 people. 1 had to be bad, because 1 was like Amarantha, or the Ador, solitary beings. 1 was a nasty number, and 3 was too much. It was 3 sisters crammed into a tiny cottage, hating each other until they choked on it, until it poisoned them. This girl chose 2, because 2 means Tamlin and me. She goes up to the lever, puts her arm on it, and realizes that her hand is in a searing pain. She looks back at it, and it's the tattooed arm, and the eye is fucking blinking at her. She's like, what is going on? She goes over, puts her hand on the number 1 lever, and it's, again, searing pain. She turns. The spikes are almost on top of her and Lucien. She can feel the heat coming off them. She puts her hand over to lever number 3, and there's nothing there. She tries it one more time. She goes back to 2, there's pain, 1, there's pain, 3, there's nothing. She grabs the 3rd lever and pulls it down, and the mechanism stops. And both her and Lucien are just like, oh my fucking god. Feyre bursts into tears because she's just so overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that her illiteracy, what she has been like so self-conscious about this whole time, almost got her and Lucien killed, and there was nothing she could do about it. Literally, the only way that she survived this was because of Rhys's magic. Now, as the ceiling is rising back up, and the audience and Amarantha are starting to have like a viewing opportunity, she hears a voice in her head that says, get up, stop crying. So she gets up and stops crying. This voice says, look Amarantha in the eye for 10 seconds and then walk away. So Feyre stands up as like the grate's being pulled up. She fucking dead eyes Amarantha, stares her down for 10 seconds, turns and walks her ass out of that Coliseum, saying nothing, marches back on down to her cell, gets into her cell, and has a full-on breakdown. All of the emotions come out. She is just absolutely having the worst time of her life. She's like, I am so worthless. I can't even read. I almost got like myself and Lucien killed because I can't read. Like, there's no way that I am passing a third trial. It's just not going to happen. We're all going to die because of me. Rhysand shows up in her cell as she's having her little breakdown, and he tells her to stop crying, and she doesn't. So he goes over, like, grabs hold of her face and licks her tears off, and she is like, what the fuck? And backs up, and he's like, there, you stopped crying.
You said, what the fuck, dog?
Man, my notes just say, ew. Rhysand is like, that was a pretty rough time you had there. Feyre breaks down, she's like, I can't fucking read. And he's like, well, we certainly didn't know that. And he's like, to us, it just looked like, you know, a crazy little riddle. That's something you absolutely need to keep to yourself. Do not tell anyone that. And he's like, you've had a rough one, kid. I'm gonna give you the night off. At this point, Feyre is just like mentally shattered. She is sitting in her dungeon for days and like cannot bring herself to do anything. She's like, it is all hopeless, you know, there is nothing left in the world. And then she hears music coming down from the grates, and it reminds her of Tamlin playing the fiddle, playing the banjo, and their night dancing and kissing, and she's like, you know what, there is good left in the world.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Fertile. And it's worth fighting for.
She pulls herself together and is like, I'm gonna win this thing. Oh my god, the riddle. I didn't even get to that part. So, this riddle, Amarantha immediately gave her the riddle and was like, here's, you know, what you have to think about at your time. Again, any time that you want to get out of here, you can get out of here. You just need to answer this one little riddle. Okay, so after Amarantha got Feyre's name, she gave her the riddle. Here's the riddle. There are those who seek me a lifetime, but we never meet, and those I kiss, but who trample... There's no riddle because she can't even read. There are those who seek me a lifetime, but we never meet, and those I kiss, but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favor the clever and the fair, but I bless all of those who are bare enough to dare. By large, my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow. Oh, love.
I'm gonna kill him. Love.
So, anyway, once she has the riddle, she, again, is thinking about it, but is basically like, I have no way to solve the riddle. I don't know what it is. I have absolutely no clues. I'm just gonna, you know, fucking minute to win it, bet it all on this last trial that's coming up. As her next week with Rhysand comes, she is being brought with his, like, shadow creatures through the hallways to the room to be done up by him. Now, as they're going through, they hear some voices coming down the hall, and the shadow creatures, like, take her behind, you know, like a tapestry, and they hide her there, and they listen, and the adder is in a conversation with someone else, someone she doesn't recognize, and he's basically saying that, like, the King of Hybern is very upset with Amarantha, like, she fucked it up last time, and he's like, he doesn't trust her anymore. Feyre is like, oh, well, that's interesting, but I was also told by Alice not to believe everything I hear, so I'll just forget about this. It is never brought up again. This better fucking come back up in the next book, otherwise, like, it served no purpose. I do not know what was going on here. SparkNotes doesn't know what's going on here, so we're just gonna skip over it. I am too tired at this point to even think about it. Now, the parties continue on as usual as she's being, you know, like, drugged, forced to dance, la la la, and then is returned to her cell. Again, unharmed. I cannot stress that enough. The last day before the last trial, she is, you know, like, left alone in a corner. This is before she's had any wine, so basically everyone's ignoring her. They don't care about her until she's drunk. She's just, like, standing up against the wall, and someone walks up to her and touches her hand, and she just kind of like looks over in the side of her eye, and she sees Tamlin standing there, and then he walks away and kind of, looks back over his shoulder at her, calmly walks through the party and away. She follows him back through the party, back to, like a closet in a corner, gets in there, there are no lights on, and they just immediately start trying to fuck. Literally, no words were exchanged. They have been looking at each other for 3 months at this point, not a single word. They just immediately start taking clothes off, sucking each other's faces, going at it. As they're in there, Rysand poofs into the room and is like, whoa, what do we have going on here? He's like, I thought better of you two. Really, Tamlin, put your pants back on. And Tamlin has to go put his pants back on. Rysand fucking like scolds him like a child. Feyre's like, this is so fucking embarrassing. They're able to see a little light. All of the body paint that was on Feyre is smudged all over the place. It is covering Tamlin, and there is no way out of here. Rysand is like, you wouldn't want Amarantha to see you looking like this. He, snaps his fingers. All of the body paint that was on Tamlin is cleaned up, and he's like, get out of here, you little rascal. Tamlin goes on his way. He turns back to Feyre and just says, I love you, and leaves. That is the first thing they've said in months to each other. Now, Rysand is left in there with Feyre, and he's pissed. He's like, what were you thinking? You are going to blow this for everyone. And Feyre is like, why do you care? Like, we're all gonna die anyway. And Rysand's like, why do I care? This entire time, it has been very heavily suggested that Rysand has a thing for Feyre, whether he's into her or just being like enamored with her. There's a connection going on there, and I don't like it. I don't like this dynamic. All of a sudden, he whips around, looks at the door, and then lunges at Feyre and kisses her. She is like, what the fuck? Like, I do not want this, and is trying to push against him. And he continues to kiss her, and as he's doing that, the door opens, and Amarantha and Tamlin and a whole group of people are there looking at them. Amarantha's like, Rysand, what are you doing in here? He takes a step back. He is now covered in her body paint. Her body paint is still all smudged. And he's like, oh, I just wanted to have, a little fun before our last night. Feyre looks at Tamlin, and he's still just like stone cold fucking nothing going on up there. And she just feels so guilty because she's like, I did not want this. Like, he needs to know that I did not want this. But she can't do anything about it. And Amarantha is like kind of pissed off because, again, Rysand is her boy toy, but she's just like, whatever, like, get it out of your system with the dirty humans. And Rysand's like, ha ha ha, yeah. They walk out of the closet, and he's like, like, I've had enough of playing with you for the day. Like, he's like, get on back to your cell. And so she leaves and goes back to her cell. A little while later, Rysand shows up in the cell, fucking exhausted, like plops down. At this point, he fucking like bares his soul and is venting about her, and he's like, I hate Amarantha. Like, this whole thing is fucked up. He's like, I, just want to be out of here. I want to be free. And Feyre's like, why are you telling me all of this? And he's like, well, we're all gonna die anyway, so I might as well tell someone. He's also like, everyone is counting on you. If you do not win this last task, we are all dead. We are all going to be stuck with her forever. No pressure. Feyre is like, well, you're always aligned with Amarantha. Like, how did you get to be chosen for like her position of boy toy whore? And tells Feyre that when Tamlin's dad was aligned with Amarantha, his father was on the other side, and his father was the one to kill Tamlin's father and his brothers. Amarantha did not like this because, again, those were her allies. So as a punishment, she took the High Lord of the Night Court's son as like her personal sex slave. That's him. And he's like, I was the one unlucky enough to be chosen. He's just as trapped as everyone else. And he's like, and he tells her that the whole reason that he's stripping her naked, painting her, and then touching her all up every night is to rile Tamlin up. The better reason is because he knows as soon as Feyre is able to break whatever curse is on them, Tamlin is going to lose his mind, and the first person that he wants Tamlin to attack is Amarantha. Rhysand knows that like anything he does to Feyre is going to blow back on her first. All of that rage that is pent up in Tamlin and all of like the power that he has and all of his magic, he is going to eviscerate her. Now, the second reason for the body paint on Feyre is for Rhysand's own protection. Basically, he's saying, you know, Tamlin's gonna go after Amarantha, but he can also clearly see that I have not been touching you anywhere inappropriately. Like, it's all inappropriate touching, but, you know, you get the gist. All of the paint that's smeared is on, like, her waist and on her arms, and that's it. There's clearly no assault that's been happening. And Rhysand says that that is also clear to Tamlin, and after Tamlin's done ripping Amarantha apart, he is going to turn on me. I am public enemy number 2. And the fact that he can see that I have not been harming you should be enough that he will spare my life for, you know, a second or two before I'm able to book it out of there. He basically says, you know, I have just as much reason as anyone to hate Amarantha, and I do. Rhysand then looks at Feyre and is like, you know, with all this information, like, you could just go to Amarantha. She might be so happy that you uncovered me as a traitor that she might just give you Tamlin and let you go. And Feyre says, no, she's not gonna do that. And she says, you know, when you made that deal with me, you let me barter you down to 1 week. You could have asked for every single week of the month. You could have asked for my entire life, and I would have given it to you because I love Tamlin, and you know that you could have done that. And Rhysand looks at her and says, I know, and leaves. Next day, dawn of the final day, Feyre is brought out of her rooms. She's brought into the throne room, and she is like brought up to the stage in front of Amarantha. Amarantha looks at her and says, have you solved my riddle? Feyre says nothing. And Amarantha says, well, are you ready for your final trial? Like, is there anything you want to say before we're gonna kill you? And Feyre just looks at Tamlin. She says, I love you. Even if I die, all of this will have been worth it to save you because I love you. And Tamlin does nothing. It's not even like the white knuckle grip that he's been doing before, trying to keep in his emotions. There's truly like not a hint of emotion on his face. And Feyre just turns around and is like, let's get started. Amarantha has 3 hooded figures brought in and knelt down in front of the throne before Feyre. She also has brought out 3 ash daggers on pillows, and one is placed next to each person. Amarantha then tells Feyre that her final trial is to kill 3 innocent people, to stab them in the heart. Feyre is like, what? Like, you want me to kill these people? And Feyre's like, I can't do it. This is, you know, like, this is too far. I can't kill 3 people. But then she remembers that she is fighting for literally everyone's life at this point, and she's like, I have to do it. She walks up to the first person. They are unhooded, and it's just this fairy, and he is sobbing and he is begging for his life, and Feyre takes the ash dagger and plunges it into his heart and kills him. She moves on to the next person and is like, I can't do this again. I can't just keep killing these people. This can't be worth it, but I also can't back down. The hood is taken off the second person, and it's a woman, and she starts praying, and this is the same prayer that Tamlin said for the fairy whose wings were ripped off in his house and they, you know, held hands with as he died. This woman gets through her prayer and just looks Feyre like dead in the eyes and is like, do it. And Feyre picks up the ash dagger and stabs her in the heart again. Now there's only one person left. She walks over to the third person kneeling, pulls back the hood, and is looking down at Tamlin kneeling on the floor. She realizes, I am being asked to kill Tamlin in order to save everyone else. Feyre is like, I cannot do it. She's like, there is no way that I could live with myself if I were to kill him. I'm doing this whole thing for him. She's like, I should just turn the knife on myself. Everything I've done has been for him. I cannot kill him now. But at the same time, should she choose him over everyone else in Prythian. And she is having just the worst little mental gymnastics here, and remembers what Alice said about there still being part of the curse in play, and that she needs to, listen to everything and not believe her senses. Feyre realizes that there's no way Amarantha would willingly lose this battle. She wants Tamlin for herself, and if she allows Tamlin to die, she doesn't get to have him, plain and simple. She's like, how does this even make sense? Feyre looks back in her mind palace of just absolutely crystalline, clear memories, and remembers a certain phrase that was used when she was eavesdropping on all of their conversations all these months. All this time, when she thought that they didn't know she was listening, they knew that she was listening, and they were trying to give her hints about the curse the entire time. She recalls at multiple instances Tamlin being described as having like a stone cold heart, and it's that exact phrase used multiple times, and she's like, that's kind of weird for multiple people to say the same exact thing over and over about him. And then she remembers the night that they had sex, that she was laying her head on his chest and she did not feel a heartbeat. She miraculously realizes that must be part of the curse that's still in play. How Amarantha is holding on to everyone's power is that she turned all of their hearts to stone. So Feyre picks up the knife. She's looking down at Tamlin. Tamlin's looking up at her. She's like, I better be fucking right about this. She takes the ash dagger, stabs him in the heart, and then watches him like slump forward. As she's pulling the dagger out, she looks and the tip of the dagger is fucking bent. Tamlin kind of like raises back up and is smiling at her. Obviously, he's not well. He's been stabbed in the heart, but he's still alive, and she fucking won. Our dumbass girl fucking outsmarted Amarantha. And Amarantha, she is pissed. She's like, you know what? You might have outsmarted me, but you dumb bitch, you agreed to this fucking bargain, and in the bargain, I said that I would release them, but I didn't say when. If you solved the riddle, I would release them immediately, and if you didn't solve the riddle, I would just release them. I didn't say when, and I'm not doing it now. And she immediately starts fucking torturing Feyre. She like throws her on the ground and is breaking every single bone in her body, one by one. Poor Tamlin is still on the ground, reeling from being stabbed. Again, the ash daggers do work on them, so it's like he was actually stabbed, and he's healing, but not fast enough. Rysand, in the crowd, runs up to Tamlin, grabs the dagger that had been used to stab him, and lunges at Amarantha. Amarantha fucking like force blasts him back, sends him, like careening into a wall, then continues to just like crack Feyre's bones on the ground. Feyre is absolutely losing it. She's like, please stop, please stop. And Amarantha's like, I'll stop if you admit you don't love Tamlin. And Feyre's like, I'm not gonna do that. So she's just there, snapping her like bubble wrap. Tamlin is on the ground, fucking healing slow as ever, like begging her to stop, and Amarantha will not. Feyre, as she's sitting there, as her bones are being cracked one by one, she's like, you know what? For Tamlin, this is all worth it. All of this pain I'm being put through, all of this torture, like, it is worth it because I love him so much. And our smooth-brained girl over here has a little epiphany and is thinking about the riddle and is like, that's what the riddle is. The answer is love. Right as Amarantha snaps her spine in two. Feyre comes to, and she realizes that she is looking at her mangled corpse from another pair of eyes. She is across the room from where she was before, and she sees her corpse on the ground. She is dead. She sees Amarantha standing over her, and she sees Tamlin behind Amarantha. Now, in the crowd, someone moves. Feyre, in these new eyes, looks over and sees Lucien and sees him pull his mask off. Tamlin, at this point, looks up like a fucking anime protagonist, takes off his mask, smirks, and then fucking tears into Amarantha. He absolutely like rams her up against a wall. Lucien from the crowd literally pulls out a sword, throws it to him. Tamlin catches it, stabs her down through the fucking head with a sword, and then rips out her throat with his teeth. Feyre realizes that she is watching all of this happen through Ryson's eyes, that she is now seeing what he is seeing, and that she must be dead. After Tamlin kills Amarantha, she sees him go over and like cradle her broken corpse and just fucking sob. As this is happening, the High Lord of the Summer Court waltzes on over, something's glittering in his hand, and he drops it onto Feyre's corpse. All of the other High Lords of Prythian follow and do the same thing. They take a sparkling little dewdrop and they drop it onto her. Ryson is the fucking last one to come up there. He holds out his hand with a little sparkling thing and he says, "For what she gave." And then he looks and says, "This makes us even." And he drops it onto her, and all of a sudden, she springs back to fucking life. What in the Mewtwo Strikes Back bullshit is this? I cannot believe that they, like, cried her back to life. Feyre then wakes up with a gasp and realizes that she's alive. She is not in pain anymore, but she feels better. She's in her vampire era. She's like, I can do more than I could ever do before. And Tamlin's like, it's the only way we could have saved you. We made you a high fae. You are no longer mortal. You are now one of us. Feyre is like looking at her body. She turns around, looks at Tamlin, and gazes upon his beautiful unmasked face. This entire time, I was just hoping so much that he was gonna be ugly. He's not. He's just, you know, like a solid-looking white guy. But she's like, he's everything I ever wanted. And at this point, the trials are done. Ryson is nowhere to be seen. The entire court is in shambles. You know, Lucien's fucking, like, traitorous, mean-ass brothers are nowhere to be seen. All of the monsters that were there that were loyal to Amarantha are fighting the rest of the courts. And it's chaos. Eventually things settle down. They have a meeting to try to, you know, solve everything out, but Feyre is just out of it. She is so traumatized and like guilt-stricken because she murdered 2 innocent people. She's like, I can never recover from this. Tamlin kind of sees this and is like, you know, let's get you out of here. He brings her to a room. And is, you know, like healing all of the other wounds she has because your girl was banged up. He's like, how can I even begin to thank you for everything that you did? Like, you saved the world. She's like, I don't want to talk about it. And he looks at her tattooed arm and is like, we're gonna find a way to get you out of this. And she's just like, I don't want to talk about it. He's like, we don't have to talk about it. And then they have sex again. In the middle of the night, Feyre is awoken by like a pulling sensation. Tamlin's still there, and she leaves him in bed and walks up out of like the castle that they're in essentially, and goes up a staircase and realizes that she is now outside in the light. And standing outside in front of her is Ryson. Now Ryson's like, I just wanted to say my goodbyes. And Feyre's like, didn't you forget? Like, I owe you a week of every single month for the rest of my life. And he's like, don't think I forgot. And Feyre's like, why did you do it? Why did you attack Amarantha? Ryson says, I want to be remembered by historians as someone who acted. I want to be front and center in the attention. And I also didn't want you to die alone. Ryson's like, how does it feel to be a high fae now? She says that, you know, like everything's better, her senses, her muscles are stronger, but her heart is still human. And Ryson says that that is something that she should be thankful for, is her soft, soft human heart. Now, right as he's leaving, he's saying goodbye to her, and he is fucking like overcome with shock. Like he literally like flinches backwards and he just fucking like books it out of there. He goes off flying out of there. He loves flying. This bitch loves to fly, but he is out of there. He was scared by something and we do not know what that something was, and it is freaking her out. Feyre goes back down and her and Tamlin are ready to leave. They're destroying the court under the mountain. Someone, you know, took Amarantha's body away to be burned, but they noticed that when they were taking her away, the finger bone and the eyeball ring from Jurian were nowhere to be seen. As they're leaving, Tamlin uses his power to crash down the court under the mountain, and they go back the way that Feyre came in, back to the spring court. And as they walk out, they can see the manor in the distance. Alice and her 2 nephews come running up. They're running through the fields, and they see Lucien calling them home for dinner, and Tamlin takes her hand and is like, let's go home. The end. Oh my god. This book has taken up every single square inch of my mind for like the past week and a half. It goes from a typical fantasy book to a romance book to just like the weirdest mindfuck that you can think of, like Hunger Games-esque like torture devices going on here. Oh my god, there are so many layers to it, and I do not have time to get into all that because it is like 7:30. I have been at this for way too long. I need to learn to shut up. I need to stop talking. Anyway, I love this book. Overall, thought it was great. If it was not for for those 2 chapters, if we forget about those, I loved it. But with those in there, I'm angry. Anyway, I will begrudgingly be reading the rest of these. It truly has like a death grip on my brain at this point, and I need to know what's going on, giving too much of my life to Sarah J Maas. And let me tell you, Missy, you are 1 strike away from losing everything. If you put one fucking little hair out of place, I am gonna be out of here. And I have the feeling that you are going to do that again and again and again, and I'm still gonna come crawling back for more. You know, less porn than I thought. I thought this was going to be very smut heavy, and it surprisingly wasn't. You know, even compared to like a regular book, they didn't talk about her boobs that much, which, you know, that's gotta stand for something. Wasn't as smutty as I thought it was going to be, but I also did watch Challengers and didn't think that that was that horny of a movie, and then a week later was like, oh no, it was very horny. So this could be the same thing. I think I might have just stressed blocked it all out. I need to go. I need to walk some dogs. Give this book a read if you want. I need to get out of here. Oh my god, a quart of Thorns and Roses. What time is it? It's 7:30. All right, peace out. Ugh.